Testing, testing, one, two, three. Sorry, mic sounds good. I'm scared to move my Blue Yeti because it disconnected on me like 2 times already. Testing. All right, let's just see if we can get through this. All right, so I am, what, 19 days late sharing my top 10 games of 2022. If you're not familiar with this channel at this point, for the past year or two, I think this is the second year I'm doing this officially, at least in terms of making a stream on reading through my top 10 games of the year. Ideally, I wish I could have this ready by the 1st of January, but it just never works out that way. Um, if you're also not familiar with my games writing, I have a personal gaming blog where I try to write at least 2 to 3 paragraphs on every game that I finish. When I'm making my game of the year list, it's very rare for me not to include um, games that I didn't finish. Did I say that right? So if I didn't finish a game, it likely wouldn't be on the list. There's been 2 instances in the past 5 or 6 years where I've been tracking and making game of the year lists and game of the year writing posts. There's been maybe 2 or 3 instances out of like what 50, 60 some games listed where I didn't finish them, but I felt so strongly about them that I included them on my top 10. And lists are just silly and fun and kind of arbitrary and don't really mean anything. My feelings on one game can change honestly day to day, like week to week. So the order of these games don't hold. I don't really hold too much. What I'm looking for. The ordering doesn't mean as much as the thoughts that I have on the games. If that makes any sense. So, but listing and making lists is fun, and ordering things is fun. So, uh, the last stream I did was sort of a 2022 in review, so gaming in 2022. It's going to be archived on my YouTube channel as well. That was more of kind of like a look back on what I played and kind of what some categories and some like not awards, but some uh, topics or discussions on the games that I played that didn't quite fit into like a top 10 list. So that's what I streamed on Tuesday, and that's archived on the channel and will be uploaded to my YouTube channel. So that was like favorite DLC, favorite ongoing game, something I call lost levels, which are games that I started last year or started in 2022 but didn't finish. So I fell off of them for one reason or the other. So it's sort of categories or ideas like that get tossed into like a sort of like look back post. Um, Anything that doesn't belong on a proper list gets thrown into that sort of filing, I guess you could say. All right, so we're gonna start with a special shout out to the Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series. So, if you're not familiar with my channel, all of my channel emotes are tributes to Klonoa, and Klonoa is one of my favorite games of all time. Was one of my favorite 2D platformers of all time. I streamed an entire playthrough of the first game from this collection on my channel. It's archived on my YouTube channel as well. I rarely do full game playthroughs. I rarely stream full game playthroughs, so I made a special sort of allowance for this game. But I'll just read through what I wrote. So it's a miracle that the Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series exists. Klonoa Door to Phantomile specifically is the first game to ever make me cry. Someone who grew up with 2D platformers, Klonoa was the first game in the genre that felt like it pushed the medium forward. With its legacy rooted in games like Ninja Gaiden, Klonoa felt more meaningful and unique than its contemporaries with its 2.5D perspective and emotionally driven story. I streamed an entire 100% replay of the first game from the collection on my Twitch channel, which is linked from here if you want to go check it out, over the summer, and it was such a joy to revisit. With that said, I don't think it would be fair to include this package on my top 10 list, considering it's a re-release of decades-old games. If you walk away from this post and feel compelled to do anything, please buy or support the Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series, so the series doesn't go dormant for another 10 years. So yeah, I didn't feel um let me get rid of that. There we go. I didn't feel it was like fair to include this on my top 10, even though honestly, like I enjoyed replaying Klonoa 1 way more than like a lot of some of the games I even included on my top 10, let alone my honorable mentions. So yeah, Klonoa Special. Check it out. If you just like games in general, or you like platformers, 2D platformers specifically, or just like fun games with like good story, good characters, good music, good gameplay. Just it's just awesome. Just play it. All right, so this is kind of a special category. This arguably could have fit into my other stream the other night. So, but I decided to include it on my top 10 list proper, or the top 10 post or stream, whatever you want to call this. So, my favorite games of 2022 that didn't release in 2022. So, these are kind of like late to the party games. So, games that could have released in any other year, but I happened to play through them and felt strongly about them last year. And it's already kind of spoiled on the screen, but that was Devotion. There's actually two games and then some like kind of mini honorable mentions for this category. The Devotion, developed by Red Candle Games, arguably my favorite game of the year that I played for the first time that didn't technically release in 2022. Next to Ease 9 Monstrum Nox, which is, spoils the next entry. Devotion has a really interesting development history. It was previously removed from Steam in China, and today it can only be purchased from the developer's website. You can find the game here. So on the blog post after the fact, if you want to check it out, I link to the developer's website where you can purchase the game, DRM free, and all that good stuff. Devotion is a first person horror game that's beautifully paced with an amazing yet tragic story. The game takes place in one family's apartment during particular periods of time. To unravel the mystery, the player must venture back and forth between various apartment rooms, solving puzzles and finding clues. There's a wonderful sense of place and devotion considering it takes place in one location. The game has so many memorable moments too, like the 2D picture book sequence that left me speechless. By the way, there's going to be open spoilers, not too many crazy wild spoilers, but I'm just going to be talking freely about any game that I list here. I streamed Devotion on my Twitch channel on Halloween night and finished the game in one sitting. Between Devotion and their previous game, Detention, Red Candle Games is making some of the best horror games on the market. If Devotion released in 2022, it easily would have made my top 10 list for the year. I can't wait to see what this developer does next, and hopefully their next project doesn't get banned on Steam. I didn't realize what they were working on next. I think it's called something Soul. And it looks like a 2D like action RPG or something. I don't know. There's not a whole lot on it. There's some images and maybe like one trailer on Steam or on online. So yeah, I'm gonna give it to Devotion. Devotion was my favorite game that didn't release in 2022, but I started it or played through it in 2022 for the first time. And then the runner-up was Ease 9, which just missed it by a year. It was a 2021 game, I think, technically. Ease 9 Monstrum Nox. Developed by Falcom, is the latest entry in the long-running Ease franchise and the follow-up to Ease 8, Lacrimosa of, I think it's Dana, not Donna. Ease 9, for better or worse, still retains the party-based gameplay found in the more recent titles. If you've played the previous entry, Ease 9 is essentially the same game, but instead of a tropical island, Adel and friends have found themselves in a prison town. Ease 9 has often been criticized for its somewhat bland look, and while a dreary fortress town isn't as appealing as a tropical island, the prison city isn't without its charm. From my recollection, Ease 9 is the first Ease game to recognize most of Adel's previous exploits and uses it as a focal point in the story. Most Ease titles are treated as standalone adventures with few references to previous games. In Ease 9, however, Falcom seems to have taken a big picture approach, almost treating the games as if it was one of their Legend of Heroes titles. This decision to make Ease more dialogue and story heavy hasn't sat well with the older fan base. However, I don't mind the approach that they've been taking as of late. Ease 9 Monstrum Nox occupies a specific part of my childhood I don't want to lose sight of. Harkens back to a time of little responsibility, cozy JRPGs, and endless summer month. So I'll always make time for a Falcom game, and I can't wait to see what's next in Ease 10, which they've announced Nordics. Ease 10 Nordics. I thought it was Nordic, but it's plural. It's Nordics. Uh, so yeah, Ease 9 was I love Falcom games, and I'm behind on the Legend of Heroes games because they're too big. They're too much of a commitment. I just fell behind once they started finally releasing all of them in the West. But Ease, even though Ease has gotten bigger, and I hope they kind of ran it back for 10, because they're almost becoming Legend of Heroes sized games. Like this was like a 40-hour game when like Ease 4 or Ease 3, like Ark of Napishtim or Oath of Felgana, like they're like 5 to 10 hour games sometimes. No more than 10 to 12 usually, but these are like triple the length. Like the most recent since Ease 7, 7, 8, and now 9. And I don't know about 10 yet. I can't tell from how they're talking about it in the pictures they've shown. But they're massive games. Like they're big commitments. Not as big as Legend of Heroes, but like they're getting there. A few other games I finished 2022 that didn't release this year that I also really liked were Marsupilami, Huba Adventure, Solar Ash, and the Gunk. I think I'll put Unpacking in there as well. Unpacking was really good. I played that this year too, in 2022. Maybe I'll add a few more to that little. So, before I get on to my honorable mentions, I will say a lot of the writing in this blog post specifically, and what I'm reading and what I'm saying, I typically just pull. Um, this year specifically, I pulled what I have originally wrote because my thoughts really haven't changed too much, but I did edit like them to a degree. I kind of cut some of the writing from the original post for this post just so I'm not sitting here like reading for 2 hours because it's just I can't do that. I'm trying to keep this like a tight hour or so. It'll probably spill a little over an hour. Um, so if you want to read my original writings, I'll get to that in a second. So again, before we get to honorable mentions, a special shout out to Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series. Go play it if you just like fun games that have depressing endings. And my favorite games of 2022 that didn't release in 2022, I'm gonna give it to Devotion, but then very shortly followed by Ease 9. These were two of my favorite games last year, but they weren't 2022 new releases, so they don't get the proper top 10 listings or rankings, I guess you could say. All right, so my top 10 honorable mentions of 2022. So I'll just read what I wrote here. Similar to MinMax's two tens, I was originally going to make a top 20 list of 2022. There were just too many great games I played this year, and making my top 10 was hard enough. To save time, I also copied what I had originally wrote for each of the following games, only slightly edited. If you want to read what I had to say about the following games in more detail during Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 of 2022, you can read about it here. And I just list out all of the links to each of the individual quarterly posts, respectively. So here are the 10 honorable mentions that nearly made the cut, but for whatever reason, they just weren't top 10 material for me. So I was really, what's the word I'm looking for? I almost convinced myself just to do a top 20, but I feel like top 20s are like, I just made them 10. I just chose 10 honorable mentions, but think of it as a top 20 list. If you're familiar with MinMax, I actually linked to their YouTube video where they construct their two tens, which is something exclusively that they do. It's a kind of a play on where they're based out of Minnesota. But they make a top 20 list essentially, but it's really kind of like a top 10 plus like 10 honorable mentions in a sense. That's how at least I look at it. And they kind of argue amongst themselves like how they sort of justify like two top 10 lists. But yeah, I had trouble leaving some games out or not kind of bringing attention to certain games. So I wanted to usually I do like I think last year I did 5 honorable mentions. And then um this year I chose 10 because I played so much stuff this year that I felt really like um jazzed about. Hey Keylok. Just in time for my top 10 honorable mentions. You're gonna be bothered with my overall number one is. All right, so now before before I get to reading through the top 10 honorable mentions, like I'll just say that the ordering, um well, Scorn's honorable mention 10, so think of Scorn as the 20th place. So my 10th honorable mention was Scorn. Developed by Ebb Software, is a first-person survival horror game that's clearly inspired by HR. Is it Giger or Geiger art? It's a disgusting, gross experience that takes the minimalistic approach in every aspect of its design and presentation. There's no dialogue or menus outside of the title screen and the various options and configurations you can toggle. It arguably commits to the single. Now, this is I would get heat for this maybe. It arguably commits to the single shot approach more so than even 2018's God of War. The game is dripping with atmosphere, but it's a hard sell for non-horror enthusiasts. Some have compared it to Myst, but considering the game has combat and guns, it actually reminded me of a bit of From Software's Shadow Tower Abyss for the PS2, which never released in the West. Scorn is a very cryptic game, but it's fairly linear, and the puzzles are mostly simple outside of the start of the game. The guns are weird, and fighting the monsters feels messy and janky, which makes sense considering you're playing as a skinned corpse of sorts. I completed the game with all achievements unlocked. Can't say I loved Scorn, but I'm glad it exists, and I was happy to experience whatever it was trying to accomplish. So, yeah, Scorn was like top, or was my 10th honorable mention. It was a one and done experience. I streamed on my YouTube channel here. May have just jumped right to like yeah, it was this puzzle. I keep coming back to this. So I talked about this like the last my Q4 post. Um this puzzle was so I just tripped myself out. I was looking at my original the dialogue from people in the video that I brought up and I'm like, "Wait, who why is other people are in here?" Yeah, this puzzle was like it's the hardest thing in the game and it's within the first hour. Um and usually I don't mind like cryptic like puzzles like this. Like I thought it was cool ultimately, but like to kind of just drop you in a space with like a and Scorn immediately like there's all these things you can interact with and they do nothing. And then you arrive at this wall and there's no directions or anything. And I usually again like I appreciate that kind of stuff, but it was so confusing. I never knew if what I was doing was like not giving me the correct feedback. I'm like I don't understand anything. um but after this puzzle, the game gets a lot more linear and the puzzles aren't as like obtuse and frustrating. There's actually are some pretty cool puzzles in that game. Yeah, is this how the game started? I think so. I'm including Scorn at the very top or the very bottom, however you want to look at, of the honorable mention list, just because it's just like it's cool. There's a lot of like I like all the mechanisms. I like all of the hand animations and just like it doesn't hold your hand. Yeah, yeah. Um, and it commits to what it wants to be, and I kind of respect it for that. All right, my ninth honorable mention, and again, it was so hard to number. Yeah, they're in an order, so it's 10. You can see, I do HM 10. Might be hard to see like on your end. I did try to zoom in as much as I could on my screen. So it's honorable mention 10 was Scorn. So think of that as the 20th, my 20th favorite game that I played that was new to 2022. And the next game would be Hell Pie. So this is the ninth. Um, yeah, they're kind of ranked, but like, I really, really had trouble. Yeah, I made a top 20 list. Well, I said at the start, I don't know if you got in time hearing me kind of like justify my reasoning for making my list this year. I really had a hard time making a top 10 because I played so much stuff that like I liked enough that I was like, man, I kind of walked away like thinking about it, and like some games kind of like really left a lasting impression on me. And plus I just wanted to bring attention to maybe some games that wouldn't get talked about, because every fucking person's top 10 list is like God of War is number one, you know. Surprisingly, the outlets I listen to, so I checked out MinMax, Giant Bomb, Easy Allies is doing theirs next week, I think, or in a couple days. um I've listened to Nextlanders, we talked about that. And I checked out Kind of Funny's top 10, and it was just I don't want to, whatever. Everyone was just like God of War number one game, and I'm like, I don't want to be like, uh, what's the word I'm looking for, contrarian or whatever. And I liked God of War, I finished it, and you know how I feel about it, Keylock. But I just was like, man, everyone's lists are just like, they're just kind of boring. Even though some of my top 10 games are very like, there's some games in there that are definitely like on other people's top 10 lists. So anyway, my ninth game was Hell Pie, developed by Sluggerfly. It's the disgustingly well-made 3D platformer made up of all the best ingredients from the past. While Hell Pie does have a story, it's mostly a collectathon through and through. You play as an intern at Hell Inc., the official headquarters, workplace of the damned. You're tasked to collect ingredients from 4 themed worlds so that you can bake the ultimate birthday dessert for Satan himself. To aid you on your quest, you're chained to a cute cherub friend who you can use as both a grappling hook and a weapon. The character movement and how you generally feels to control your character is one of the most important aspects of a 3D platformer, and Hell Pie nails it. The open environments are fun to explore, and the stages found within are extremely well designed too. The game's just kind of gross, and the tone can be a bit off-putting at times. However, I did complete the game at 100% with the Platinum Trophy earned. Otherwise, it's one of the best 3D platformers of the year. I did stream this game a while back. I just want to at least show the swinging, because the swinging felt good. Maybe it'll show it here. Oh, this is where it actually glitched out on me here. And I'm carrying an object, so that's not a good. Let's go to like the open world or the outside of the levels. So, like I said, 3D platformers, for me, I'm always looking for like, are there fun things to collect? Are the objectives fun? Is navigating the world like feel good? So if your character moves well, has like good momentum or cool like techniques or something, like that's what I usually look for. And Hell Pie, like if my character starts swinging, I don't know, it should be, I should have capture of it somewhere in this video. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. So yeah, this is the first world in the game. It's pretty big. Like it's a big open space, and then within like that island that you're looking at, there are like um individual stages found within like the open world, and the stages in the open world, um oh, Whiplash, dude, I love Whiplash. Oh, I never finished Whiplash properly. You think I would have. Um but it is like kind of like Whiplash in a sense, because you were chained to something in that game as well. So I don't know. There's me swinging around. So I don't like Hellpie's tone, but like playing it, yeah. Are you kidding, dude? So um I played pretty much every PlayStation 2 era, Like any 3D platformer that played on, yeah, you know me well enough. So anyway, Help High is cool. If you like 3D platformers, I would totally recommend it. No one really talked about it. Again, it's kind of gross. It's a little juvenile. Like the game, you literally like, fight like pieces of shit in the game. So uh, take it for what it is. It's a good feeling. It's got good game feel. So all right, so that was number 9. So, number 8, Sonic Frontiers did not make my top 10. The developed by Sonic team is sort of a mess, but I felt compelled to see it to the end. I guess I liked it well enough to complete the game at 100% along with obtaining the Platinum Trophy, but it's also not a very difficult game to complete. Although the game justifies its aesthetic or look narratively, I still don't generally like the game's presentation. While the open zone approach grew on me the further I progressed, the layout of each island just felt sloppy. When the map is fully uncovered, I think the designers did a good job at funneling the player from one platform sequence to the next. However, I found the traditional 3D Sonic levels, cyberspace, to be extremely disappointing and easy to S rank, although there is some good music housed in these stages. Sonic Frontiers is a decent attempt at redirecting the course of the franchise, but I'm not sure if this is the path it should stay on. The game's filled with callbacks and references to previous games, and it's nice to see Sonic Team attempt to bridge all of the stories together, but the game itself is a mess. Most of the new ideas that felt half baked, and the things I liked about modern 3D Sonic titles that were present here just don't hold up to games like Sonic Generations, Colors, or Unleashed. So, yeah, Sonic Frontiers is frustrating. Like, I don't have any footage of that game that I streamed. I just played it all offline. But there's things I like about it, and I think there's like a good, there's kind of a decent wireframe or template there. But like, it didn't nail the open world stuff. It felt more like a proof of concept that was never iterated on, is how I originally wrote about it. Um, and then the kind of shoehorned cyberspace levels, which were like the traditional 3D Sonic stages, they were like all so disappointing. Like in the soundtrack, like some of the music I like, but I'm not. I think like mostly like the soundtrack's kind of disappointing compared to. I love 3D Sonic games, and I love. I forget who the main composer is on Sonic Team that works on Sonic games now, or does like the majority of the music. But like, I just thought it was really disappointing. Yeah, and not even just butt rock. Like, there's more like certain like Colors has like Sonic Colors has some really good tracks that aren't like butt rock. Like just I don't know how to describe like the kind of music like Sonic games have. Like EDM or like just electronic sort of synth heavy tracks. But yeah, like so there were parts of this game I really liked, but I can't like in confidence say it was like a top 10 game like at all. It's just way too messy. So, and I'm sure we're going to be staying in the Sonic Frontiers sort of design template for a while because the game sold well. It kind of reconvinced people who hated 3D Sonic. All of a sudden, they like it now for whatever reason, which I understand, but I don't understand. So I know we're probably going to get a Sonic Frontiers 2. So hopefully it's better. I don't know. I'll probably still play it. All right. Game honorable mention number 7. And surprisingly, this almost made my top 10. I just knocked it down to 7. I don't know why, because I played the shit out of it. And it's Neon White. Developed by, oops, I just spoiled again. Uh, Angel Matrix Ben Esposito is a frenetic first person genre blending shooter of sorts, as Giant Bomb unofficially coined. By the way, uh, today in the news, more people from Giant Bomb and GameSpot were laid off, which is really depressing and sad. So hopefully everyone who lost their jobs like will find something either elsewhere or in the industry. I don't know. It's such a depressing landscape. Like, um, it's made me like I always wanted to write for like a gaming outlet or be in the gaming industry in some fashion, like whether it was writing about games or uh, localizing games is what it was like a dream job I always wanted. I always wanted to work for 8-4, which is like based in Japan. But I just never pursued the channels or anything. So like this streaming shit and even like my blog and writing about games on the side has been just like kind of like my way of contributing to the space. But it's like, yeah, it's such a dying, the industry just seems like completely fucked. And these people who are way more talented and have way more credentials than I do to do that kind of work are getting let go left and right. And it's just so like part of me is I'm glad I never pursued it, but I'm also just kind of bummed that like things are the way they are. So I don't know. Yeah, but like even with a lot of those outlets kind of um like a lot of the people like the Giant Bomb staff always was personalities. Like they were personality people, and even when they've split, they've the Nextlander people are doing fairly well. Jeff Gersman's seems like he's doing okay and happier, like doing his solo thing. I love Easy Allies and their former game trailers, and they got bought out and fired and let go, and they're doing their own independent thing. MinMax was the former Game Informer people that got let go. So like some of these independent outlets, and I know they're like struggling. Like Easy Allies isn't doing that well apparently, or I don't know how well they're doing, but people keep thinking they're like a sinking ship, and I feel bad because I really like them, and I don't really know what's going on with them, but they're struggling. MinMax, like I think, is doing well, but regardless, yeah, Easy Allies lost a lot of people, which doesn't help either. But they weren't like let go. They just left on their own like volition. Like they just wanted to do their own thing, or they just had enough of the industry, from my understanding. But it's just sad in general. It's such a bummer. Like some days I wake like when I started this new year, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I just stop writing. Like what I'm doing right now, it took so much energy to like do what I'm like producing right now for this channel or for whatever. Um and seeing that news today, I'm just like, you know what? I don't know, just maybe just fuck all this. I don't know. I do like it. So I think I told you this before too. I got to the point where like if I'm just if I just go like offline, like disappear more than I already disappear as the channel being unexpected. Uh I feel like I'd get to a point where I'm like, I need to just like throw my fucking thoughts down somewhere, or I'm gonna go crazy. Like if I'm playing like I just downloaded this cool game called Never Awake, and I do want to stream it. I might try to stream it this weekend or maybe Friday night if I'm not doing anything. And I feel like if I'm just playing that offline, or if I don't put my thoughts down somewhere on it, I'm like I'm gonna go insane just thinking about it to myself and not having anyone to like even if it just throwing it out into the void, like it's better than just like it sitting in my head. So like I can't not play stuff without like writing it or just throwing it out somewhere, regardless if anyone's even listening or watching. So I don't know. That's a hard question for me to answer. So anyway, honorable mention number seven is Neon White, developed by Angel Matrix and Ben Esposito. It's a frenetic first-person genre-blending shooter of sorts. As Giant Bomb unofficially coined, uh, yeah, uh, is a video game ass video game. You play as White, a former assassin who, along with his cohorts, blew a mission big time during their final hours and found themselves dead. Chosen in purgatory to hunt demons in heaven, they're given a second chance at redemption. Unlike the story, the gameplay and level design is where the game shines brightest. Neon White feels like if Killer 7 collided with the Sega Dreamcast, and I mean that in the best way possible. Levels are short and sweet, and alternating between your weapons to traverse the stage feels intoxicating once you master the controls. It's a satisfying and rewarding experience, but it's a bit too long for my liking, and I could have done without the characters and some aspects of the story. I completed Neon White at rank 1 with either gold or ace ranks, collected all of the gifts, and completed each character's side quests. Um, yeah, honestly, Neon White nearly broke my top 10, and then somehow I found pushing it down to like number 7. uh, I did stream this game as well. Yeah, and I don't want to harp on the story too much. This game got a lot of flack for like I kind of considered it like Adult Swim. It felt like a Adult Swim like dubbed anime that came on at like midnight on Toonami or something is like the vibe that it has. Which like, you know, if I was in my late teens or early 20s, it would have been like this is so cool. But like there's so much dialogue and you don't have to read it, but I read it anyway because I just wanted to see like whatever the story the game was trying to tell. And the only thing, yeah, he was. It is. You're right. What's his? Oh, what's the actor's name? Um, ah, that's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, the story's stupid, and it's like there's a lot of it, and a lot of it's optional. Um, but yeah, playing this game is like it's fucking yeah. Steve Bloom or Bloom. I think it's Bloom. Uh, the coolest thing about and I usually don't like games with cards, but the cards it's almost like Baten or Baten Kaidos on GameCube. If you're familiar with that game, like the cards aren't actually. I guess Midnight Suns is maybe similar to this. You might can attest to that, Keylock. But like the cards are really just like weapons. Like at first I was like, oh man, another card game. Like I don't want to play something with cards in it. But like the cards are just your guns, and the guns can either be fired to kill enemies or they can be used to traverse the stage in unique ways. So like a rocket launcher has a grappling hook uh, utility, or you can use it to blast a rocket to kill enemies, or use it to like kind of bunny hop with like or rocket hop or whatever, like sort of Team Fortress style. Um, and the way the levels are designed, they're so geniusly laid out where like you never have to switch and think about what weapon to use. If you're just going from like segment to segment and picking up the cards along the way, like the next platforming kind of ask is the card that you just picked up. So you're never like flipping between the cards to like progress. So it moves so fucking quickly. And like once you wrap your head around like how the state and it rarely breaks that. So like from beginning to end, and it's a long game, which is why like I wish it was a little bit on the shorter side. Once you realize that like the cards that they throw at you are to be used in the order that they're given to you for like nearly like 99% of the time, like it becomes and that's why people speed run it, and like there's leaderboards and people got obsessed with like beating each other's scores because like there's not a lot of thinking. It's all like kind of quick knee jerk reactions based on like what the game's throwing at you, and you don't really have to think outside of that. So, I get it. It was cool. The soundtrack's awesome. um I love the look of the game. I love the sound of it. Uh, it it reminds me of like a Suda 51 game. It feels like it looks almost looks like a Dreamcast game or like a PS2 era game. It looks like Killer 7. I loved Killer 7. Maybe not as like sharply muted as Killer 7, but like kind of in that space a little bit. Um, but yeah, I just the story's like whatever, and I could have done without it, so that's kind of why it fell so high on my list. This is a bummer too. A lot of my honorable mentions are bummers. I thought this game was gonna make my top 10 easily. My honorable mention number 6 was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Shredder's Revenge, developed by Tribute Games, is a solid follow-up to the arcade console TMNT beat 'em up from my childhood. It feels like the natural step of progression from Turtles in Time or Hyperstone Heist, but with some modern sensibilities. Shredder's Revenge probably has the most robust and complicated moveset in the entire franchise, but it's easy to pick up and play like most classic beat 'em ups. The more advanced tech might not be as interesting as the types of combos or juggles or wall bouncing techniques you'd find in, say, Streets of Rage 4, but there's a nice middle ground here that's approachable for all types of players. With that said, I didn't feel compelled to return to Shredder's Revenge after my initial playthrough. I wish the collectibles were more meaningful or served some greater purpose, and I found the additional challenges like beating stages without getting hit to be more frustrating than fun. I did play the game solo, so perhaps it's a better experience with friends on a couch. Um, yeah, I honestly I think this game was disappointing. I love the artwork. I love the background art, the character sprites, the soundtrack by T Lopes or Lopez or T Lopes. I think it's T Lopes. Uh, is incredible. Like, but and the combat, like I said, like it's approachable. It's not too deep, but there's some like nuance to it. Um, there's an arcade mode, so you can play through it in one shot. But and maybe some other like there's another mode or two, I forget, but like it's a really short game and there's not a lot to do after you finish it. And I didn't like the challenge structure. Like all the levels have these like little mini achievements you can do, and they're all just frustrating. Like literally, like every level has a challenge that's like beat the stage without getting hit. Like it's so extreme. There's some middle ground challenges that make it fun, like find all the collectibles or like do something, kill a certain amount of enemies with like throwable objects or something like that. But like the replay value in this game, I thought was like such a bummer. And all the collectibles are just like they don't do anything. They unlock achievements, but like you collect these like newspaper articles, you can't read them. They didn't write anything for, like any lore or any kind of fun like galleries type stuff. Like I kind of don't understand like why people were so hot on this game. Maybe it was just playing with other people, which I didn't get a chance to do. So playing this game by yourself was kind of like sort of a bummer. I don't know. And the I just don't like there's like the unlocks are disappointing, the collectibles are disappointing, the achievement challenges are like more frustrating than fun. Like I don't know. Streets of Rage 4 is like a way better game, I think. And not to compare the two, because Streets of Rage 4 was Tribute Games made this, which is like they made Panzer Paladin and what Mercenary Kings and a few other games. A lot of people got this game confused with like the proper who's the developer for Streets of Rage 4? I can't like it's not is it because I know .emu they're more a publisher than developer. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. I have to go research all that again. But like it's not as good as Streets of Rage 4. It's arguably like the best. Yeah, it was a love letter or a love story to it was like a good nostalgic trip, but like taking a step back from it, I'm like, man, there's and the world map looks awesome. I love the world map where you like ride around on the little turtles van and everything. Like there's so much about this game that I loved. And it's kind of why it's like in my middle tier of my honorable mentions. But like I played through it once and I'm like, I don't want to come back to this. Like I didn't feel like I didn't want to 100% it. That's like really rare for me. Like I 100%ed Sonic Frontiers over and Hell Pie, like these random ass like, indie platformer and like shitty kind of semi shitty Sonic Team game over like a Turtles game that has like fucking awesome sprite work. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. Yeah. I put 50 hours into Babylon's Fall. I maybe played Shredder's Revenge for like 4 hours or whatever, however long it took to finish it. That's a good point. Sorry, everyone. I know. Now I feel terrible. I'll come back to you, April O'Neil and Leonardo. It was a bummer. So that's the thing. I didn't have much of an expectation for Babylon's Fall. Babylon's Fall was like an experiment. This should have been like this should have knocked it out of the park like completely, and it honestly fell short. So it's a conversation of expectations. Yeah, I don't know. I already started like a dozen games this year, so I'm not fucking coming back unless they update it like with a bunch of cool things or something. I don't know. All right, this is taking. I deviated a lot so far. So this is such a bummer too. My fifth honorable mention, and I do legit like Ghostwire more than Turtles. I'll like 100% stand behind that. Ghostwire Tokyo, developed by Tango Gameworks, is a first-person action-adventure game that takes place in a post-apocalyptic modern-day Tokyo. Ghostwire is quite the departure from Tango's previous games. While their wheelhouse is certainly horror, the Evil Within was a third-person RE4 style, chapter-by-chapter survival horror game. It was a mouthful. Ghostwire, however, is a modern-day open-world game, but with a twist. The entire game is in first person. Instead of guns and melee weapons, you're equipped with elemental magic spells, charms, and an otherworldly bow. The animations in Ghostwire are excellent, and exploring the faithfully recreated city streets of Tokyo feels incredibly immersive. From the hand weaving spellcasting animations to the slender umbrella wielding demons slowly patrolling the streets, Ghostwire is a super stylish adventure game with a lot of personality. Unfortunately, the story isn't very interesting, nor is the protagonist. Despite some interesting side quests that litter the drenched back alleys of Tokyo, Ghostwire takes the more traditional Ubisoft style open world approach when it could have been something more. I rolled credits on Ghostwire Tokyo and did a chunk of the side content, but did not go back to 100% the game yet. Yeah, and I streamed some of this. I'll just try to pick this up really quick. I had big expectations because I love The Evil Within. Um, let's get out. Let's get to the city. I think this game is really fucking cool, and I think people were too harsh on it. I think the enemy designs are incredible. The art direction is incredible. It's like has one of the most faithfully recreated. From my understanding, I've never been there, but from what I've read and saw online, one of the most faithfully recreated uh, renditions of Tokyo, like kind of shot by shot almost. Um, and any other open world game I feel like would have gotten like a Far Cry game or just some other like generic Ubisoft style open world game would have gotten like some attention or some praise to a degree, even though those games have been getting kind of slammed to a degree as well, just generally speaking. But um like there's no guns. First of all, it's an open world first person game with all like ghosts and demons and yokai, and you're using your hands to do these like cool fucking spell casting animations, and it just looks like it's just awesome looking. So here's the Ubisoft shit. Like these are like the Assassin's Creed towers. You go to these kind of gates, you cleanse them, and then they open up like portions of the map, like Ubisoft style, with like checklists of collectibles and side shit to do. So uh, I think that's what people weren't in the mood for, or it's not what they wanted from this game. But and the character's boring. The protagonist is like puts you to sleep. The story's kind of weird and not super interesting. Um, that and although the enemy designs are great, there's not a whole lot of enemy variety. So like, I think what's here is like decent. But like maybe it's just not what people wanted from it. And I think it's a good. I don't know. Like, I don't think we're ever gonna get a sequel. I don't know what Tango GameWorks is working on next, since they've been kind of acquired by the whole active or Bethesda sort of merging. I don't know if they're going to be making like an Xbox exclusive game at this point, since they're now part of or they've been a part of Bethesda. Bethesda's part of Microsoft now. Will this game? This would be a Game Pass game. This game could get like a second life on Game Pass with some updates, even though they've only added like a photo mode and like some other really weird basic things since the release of this game. It'll be a year this March, I think, that this game's been out. So we'll see. I think it's really cool. I wanted to shout it out or bring attention to it. Um, you can talk to dogs. Cats and dogs are everywhere. You can pet them and talk to them. I kind of do want to go back and 100% this game. Enemies are so fucking cool. They're just like these Slendermen businessmen with like umbrellas, and they're so intimidating looking. And there's like these giant ones. It's so cool. And it's got perfect guards. You can perfect guard like Slendermen attacking you. So I almost kind of like begrudgingly wanted to put it on like on my top 10 just to like piss people off. I don't know. But all right, let's keep going. Number 4, Horizon Forbidden West. Uh Honorable mention number 4. Developed by Guerrilla Games, is the follow-up to Zero Dawn, a post-apocalyptic action adventure epic steeped in science fiction. Horizon Forbidden West starts in a familiar territory, finds its stride halfway through, but ends on a somewhat disappointing note. The beginning area, the Dawn, which also acts as a tutorial of sorts, feels like an extremely condensed version of Zero Dawn. The majority of the game takes place in the West, however, as the player has the player trekking across wastelands, deserts, and jungles in search of subordinate functions. The goal of the game is to collect parts of a fragmented AI in hopes of restoring the Earth to its former glory. Various clans with their own cultures and beliefs have settled in the areas where these subordinate functions are housed, and that's where the majority of the game takes place. My favorite part of Horizon Forbidden West was the second half of the game where Aloy tracks down the subordinate functions. It reminded me of a classic JRPG quest where your goal was to journey to a variety of exotic locales in search of elemental stones. It's a shame the game sort of nosedives into nonsensical sci-fi territory in the latter half. But at least the performances and spectacle of it all remain strong in the final act. Finally, there's just too much focus on gear and loot, damage types, and enemy resistances, similar to the recent God of War games. There's just too many RPG elements when there doesn't have to be. The combat also doesn't feel as satisfying or rewarding as, say, Monster Hunter, although the machine designs are still great. I rolled credits on Horizon Forbidden West on hard difficulty after 50 plus hours, but walked away from the experience feeling conflicted. So I don't have footage of Horizon Forbidden West, but I like Horizon, both of the games. Like, it's a series that I like enjoy kind of visiting, but maybe more, like a series that I don't like really enjoy staying in for very long. Even though I mean, they're both pretty long games. I don't know what I want from a third game. It's probably going to happen the way the story ends in the second game. Maybe the DLC will be better. The Horizon is frustrating. Like, I love the look of it generally. I think the creature and monster or the machine designs are incredible. Like, climbing the tall necks in this game specifically were probably like the highlights of the game, outside of like visiting Las Vegas, and some of like I said, the subordinate functions, like kind of obtaining those was probably like the most interesting thing about the game. But the tall necks had, compared to the first game, had like really different, unique ways on how you had to approach them or how you had to climb them, and they were like kind of mini puzzles. And then there were like the kind of Tomb Raider mini dungeons that were scattered, like the ruins that were scattered about like the lands. Those were fun to explore too. So like, there's things I love about the game, and as much as I like the performances and all the dialogue, there's just maybe too much dialogue. Uh, and I wanted to listen to all of it, but it was also like kind of exhausting. Um, the base building stuff was cool, recruiting everyone and kind of filling out your base, that was awesome. So yeah, like, but I just don't like. I don't know. I don't hate the combat. I just don't like it. Like I said, it doesn't feel as good as Monster Hunter when you're like kind of chasing and fighting. Like, it doesn't have that like tight Japanese action game Capcom feel to it. It has sort of like a glaze of that like kind of Western jank to a degree, but still feels polished. I don't know. It's cool. Horizon's cool. I just don't love it. Speaking of which, my third honorable mention was God of War Ragnarok, developed by Santa Monica Studios, the follow up to the 2018 reboot of sorts, God of War, taking place. These would be top. These are honorable mentions still. Well, I just don't feel as strongly about them. I like them, but taking place shortly after the events of the first game, Kratos and Atreus must continue their journey in hopes of preventing Ragnarok. Keelock, you're gonna hate me with my number one. As the name implies, Ragnarok feels like an impossible game to compete with in terms of budget and production values. The game is simply gorgeous, the performances are compelling, the side quests are meaningful, the soundtrack by Bear McCreary is epic, and the game just feels like a premium experience that you can't find anywhere else. I love character action games, and as someone who grew up playing the original God of War games on the PS2, along with games like Devil May Cry, God of War has always occupied a space in my mind that I've always appreciated and liked but never loved. These recent God of War games are becoming much more RPG-ish than what's typically expected from the character action genre. There's just too much focus on gear and loot and color-coded enemies, which isn't a direction I particularly agree with. The thing I'm most disappointed with in Ragnarok is how it doesn't feel like it utilizes the power of the PS5, perhaps due to the fact that it had to be developed for the PS4 as well. The promise of no load times or seamless environments and other next-gen features feels lacking here, although the loading is very fast on the PS5 and the haptic feedback feels good. There are traces of what could have been in the Vanaheim realm, which gives the player the ability to change the time of day, and it's arguably the most interesting area in the game. I liked Ragnarok well enough, and I'm glad I got to play it before the year's end. I completed the game on no mercy difficulty at around 40 hours and did a lot of the side content. It still feels good to toss and retrieve the Leviathan axe, Swing the blades of chaos around and smash treasure chests with your bare fist. And isn't that all that matters at the end of the day? So and this is kind of like an edited uh, writing of what I originally wrote about this game, just for this top 10 stream. I mean, they nearly made my top 10. I like Horizon more than Ghostwire, and I like God of War more than Ghostwire. Ultimately, if I really wanted to fuck around with people, I would have put Ghostwire above um, Horizon and God of War. But yeah, Ragnarok was just. I felt like I had to play it, and I was like going through the motions with it. I don't know. Like I don't want to use like a game's budget or like the resources a developer has like and hold it against them. Yeah, like I don't know if I don't know if I want it like a Horizon 3 or like a God of War 3. Like I'm kind of tired, like I'm really kind of burned out on like PlayStation's premium kind of first party games. Like again, I like The Last of Us. I so like not in the mood for another one like at all. Same with Uncharted. Uncharted's fun, but like and I like God of War itself. Like I said, it's like a over the shoulder like post RE4 sort of character action game. Um so like at its core, I still want to play it. Like I like that type of game. Like removing all the God of War stuff outside of it, it still has like all the backtracking and like the kind of Metroid and Zelda sort of elements, like going through like the kind of dungeons in a sense and like upgrading your character and finding gear that lets you backtrack. Like all that shit's really cool. But I just like and I think this, like I said, like it has some of the best voice acting, some of the best performances, some of the best dialogue, like written dialogue, like in like any game, you know, arguably. But like I didn't feel I didn't really feel much about like anything while playing it. So I don't know. I will say my favorite moments from Ragnarok were um the whale in that first lake area. I forget which realm it's from, but when you unchain and kind of bring the whale out of the water, and then probably you know any of the side stuff was really good, like the meaningful side quests, like unleashing the giant octopuses from like their encampments in the desert or whatever, and then like scaling the wall of Asgard as Loki and having Heimdall like you know eating the apple and pulling him up. That was like when I was the most invested in the game, and then like the kind of you know two towers like were like the second part of a epic trilogy, movie trilogy, like the big fight in Asgard when like um what is it, the big snake shows up, like all the realms show up and there's like the huge battle. Like all that shit's really cool. But like yeah, the same part, the best part of was the like the kind of like open world, like really kind of non-handholdy um explorable parts. Yeah, like that first kind of clearing where you're on the horse in The Last of Us 2. That yeah, I'm with you. So yeah, that was God of War. It nearly broke my top 10, but I don't know. All right, my stream dipped to zero for a second. I thought I was gonna crash, and I'm over an hour, and I'm not even to my top 10 yet. All right, so number two, Splatoon 3 was my honorable mention. Number two, developed by Nintendo, is arguably Nintendo's most important IP to date. The series has sold extremely well worldwide, and in Japan, it's become a cultural phenomenon. Despite its originally debuting on the Nintendo Wii U, Splatoon, like other games previously shipwrecked on Nintendo's failed platform, was given a second chance on the Switch. While it's mostly known for its competitive multiplayer modes, developers continue to provide single player experiences in an attempt to build the world around the competitive modes while simultaneously teaching players how to play the game. Splatoon's single player campaign has more or less been a glorified training tutorial for the multiplayer modes, and while it's the best it's ever been in Splatoon 3, it could have been so much more. I completed Splatoon 3 at 100% and finished the secret challenge level 2. You can read more of my thoughts on the game here. Now, I did stream this game. Oh, stream's going longer than I wanted to, but I can't help it. So the reason why Splatoon 3 is so high is because like I did like everything in the single player, like absolutely everything. And the secret bonus level you unlock, I kind of compared it to, it's like a Champions Road equivalent to Super Mario 3D World. Like there's a level you unlock in this game when you do like kind of everything in it that like is sort of like a test for the player, and it's like a really, it took me like 3 hours to do. It's one level and it's like the most challenging thing like a Splatoon game's ever thrown at you. And I'm like, holy shit, this is like not exactly what I want from the game, but I'm not complaining that it's there. But long story short, my problem with Splatoon, and I kind of said it in that writing there, is that like it's nearly there in terms of like what I want from it. Like I think if they took what was it, Bowser's Fury, and made a Splatoon game similar to the structure of Bowser's Fury, I think that's what I want out of it in terms of the single player. Because the single player levels, they've gotten better with how you like access them. Like in Splatoon 3, you have this open big map that's explorable and has secrets, but there's still like these little gates that kind of warp you to these like individual stages. And the stages are just like these suspended obstacle courses with like platform challenges and enemies and stuff, but like they feel like training levels for the multiplayer. So they don't really have this kind of like grounded like feel to them. Like so, and I think that's that's been the problem with Splatoon, is that like the single player feels like kind of an afterthought, even though like the boss battles are always really cool and memorable. Like the final boss fight in this game is really interesting. Um, the lead up to the final boss is like sort of like a Mega Man style Wily's Castle sort of situation. Like it's really cool, but like the levels are still like these segmented off stages that feel like training courses. So like I think if they took the Splatoon, the way Splatoon feels when you play it, like inking around and kind of swimming your way through the ink and doing all of like the kind of platforming and using the guns and everything, it feels like perfect. But like the levels themselves could just be like so much more, I feel like. And I feel like they're just progressively getting there, but like we're 3 games in now and it's still kind of like their training levels. They want you to play the multiplayer. But yeah, I couldn't stop playing. Like I finished every level with every weapon type because it keeps track of that shit. Finished the secret level, unlocked everything. Like it was really fucking cool. But I've only played the multiplayer for like a couple days and I never went back. I know that's like, you know, heresy for Splatoon fans. So yeah, maybe Splatoon 4 will be what I want it to be. Just take Splatoon's mechanics, take Splatoon's, yeah, but why is there a single player then, Keelak? If it was purely a multiplayer only game, there wouldn't be a single player. I wouldn't, oh come on, it's not the same. There's a story, there's bosses. You fight, there's a big spoiler. There's a Super Mario Sunshine boss, like straight from Super Mario Sunshine, that's a boss in this game. And it's so fucking cool. It's got cutscenes, it's got a credit scroll, it's got single player shit, and it's like just not where it needs to be yet. Whereas Unreal Tournament, that's just like straight up deathmatch. Now, if they released Splatoon game that didn't have any single player and I was asking for a single player, then I think your argument is sound. But they keep making single player game, like single player campaigns, and they do keep getting better. But it's like these little incremental sort of like nudges on the kind of scale of like it did have a story. It wasn't good. I don't know. But yeah, look, the story keeps the campaigns keep getting better and they keep getting more involved. That's why I feel like we're like a moment away from like Splatoon being what I want it to be in terms of the single player stuff. And I think if they just took the mechanics and the stage design stuff, but put it in like an open setting, like in Super Mario Bowser's Fury, I think that's would be like a better approach. But yeah, and you're right, and that's clearly what this is. But like I just want it to be. I'm just I'm personally frustrated because I love everything about Splatoon. I just don't feel like playing the multiplayer. Like I love the way the characters look and they feel. I like the way the gameplay feels. I just don't want to be like endlessly playing 3 minute matches and like grinding away at these ridiculous like title unlocks that take like hundreds of hours. Like I don't know. So that's just me. I know I'm a very weird and not like standard Splatoon player, but I see where they're going with the single player, and I just want like a little bit more from it. All right, and my first number one honorable mention, because this is just like a fucking blast to play, was Tinykin, developed by Splash Team of Splasher fame, is a classic 3D platformer that feels straight out of the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox era. Um, While Tinykin shares some similarities to Pikmin, it's more rooted in traditional collectathons like Banjo-Kazooie and Jak and Daxter. In Tinykin, you'll discover Pikmin-like creatures that can be used to traverse the environment in a variety of ways. Each Tinykin type grants the player new abilities. Red Tinykin are used to destroy objects, and green Tinykin can build ladders to reach new heights, for example. The game's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids approach lends itself to a great sense of scale, with tucked away secrets and collectibles in nearly every nook and cranny of the house. You also obtain a bar of soap early at the start. That's kind of a weird type. You also obtain a bar of soap to be at the start of the game, which allows you to freely skate around the environments. Tinykin is one of the most immediately satisfying games I've played all year. It's a constant stream of dopamine, particularly for completionists or for those who simply enjoy collecting stuff. It also has the satisfaction uh, you get from delivering items to your ship in Pikmin, but without all of the micromanaging strategy and stress that comes with it. I just wish I cared more about the story and its characters. There's an attempt at world building within the house with its various bug clans and their ways of life, but for whatever reason, everything went in one ear and out the other. I completed Tinykin at 100% with all of the achievements unlocked. Um, yeah, so honestly, overall, I really struggled with this honorable mention, like ordering or ranking. A lot of those like last five games are sort of interchangeable depending on my my mood for the day. Where did I play Tinykin? But like I said, Tinykin, I love 3D platformers. If you don't know me well enough, they're like my comfort food, like bread and butter sort of gaming. I like to check out pretty much all of them. Anyone that comes out, like big or small, I'm all about. Uh, and Tinykin was just like immediately like rewarding, like no nonsense, like great stage design. Like it's about 5 or 6 hours long. It's like 5 or 6 hours long to even 100%. So you're in and out. It feels good to move around and explore, and you're just constantly picking up shit. It's just feeding into your completionist, your sort of dopamine uh, mindset. So like, I think, and also I think they could do a lot with it in terms of like a sequel or a follow up to it because it's a pretty basic game. The Pikmin comparisons aren't really appropriate because it doesn't really play like Pikmin. There's no timer, there's no time of day, there's no management, there's no like sort of real time strategy elements or anything. Um, but it's just such a joy. All right, to summarize, my honorable mentions were Tinykin, Splatoon 3, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Ghostwire Tokyo, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, Neon White, Sonic Frontiers, Hell Pie, and Scorn. So those were 10 games that I did like mostly. Like I really like them to some degree. They just weren't quite top 10 in terms of like what resonated with me personally. Um, they just had some things I didn't really like dig about them ultimately. And then before that, my two games, my favorite games of 2022 that didn't release in 2022 were Ease 9, Monstrum Nox, and Devotion, with like kind of small call outs to um, Marsupilami Huba Adventure, which is a horrible name. That should have gotten the award for worst name of a game for 2022. Solar Ash, Unpacking, and the Gunk. Those were really cool. Ready for the shotgun of short indie games? You mean for my top 10? And then again, my special shout out was for Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series. So I didn't feel like it was appropriate making this game ranked because it's older games on PlayStation 1 and 2, even though they were kind of remade. It's sort of a remake, remaster of the Wii release of the Klonoa games. But I wasn't going to put this collection, as much as I love it, and as much as everyone should be playing it and buying it so we get a real Klonoa 3, I wasn't going to put that in a top 10 at all. Just wouldn't feel right. All right, so let's go to my proper top 10. Now, this is going to bother a lot of people. God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, and like Turtles, all good shit from last year. They were my honorable mentions. And again, don't put too much stock in the rankings or numberings of things. I made multiple disclaimers in terms of how I feel about numbers and rankings. It's all just for fun. My feelings for a lot of games can change like on the dime. I could wake up tomorrow and be like, man, fuck Tinykin. Like, you know what? Splatoon 3 was better than Tinykin. So my 10th game of the year. My top 10 games of 2022. No one cares. No one's watching. You're like the only person watching this. I don't have any internet stock or any heat on me, unless people like kind of funny fans come in here and hear me kind of like trash talking Greg Miller or something, which I just like humorously like joke about. Um, my top 10 games of 2022. Number 10. Oh wait, I have my little. Here's my other disclaimer. The 2022 was another amazing year for games. There were so many games I didn't make time for this year, but if I did, my top 10 list, including my honorable mentions, could have been wildly different. I know what I like at this stage of my life, and games like The Punchwin, The Spirit and the Mouse, Shin-Chan, Me and the Professor on Summer Vacation, The Endless 7-Day Journey, which is a full title of the game, Norco, Citizen Sleeper, Lil Gator Game, Pentiment, Sifu, Vampire Survivors, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Signalis, or the dozen or so Square Enix RPGs that released this year, for example, could have easily replaced some of the games I'm about to list below. This is just to kind of show you how much this list don't matter. If for whatever on another planet or another lifetime I played these games instead, this would have probably made my top 10. So I had 2 to 3 criteria for a game to make my top 10 list this year. Almost 4 criteria. I'll throw in a fourth one. One, I had to have finished or rolled the credits on the game. 2, the game had to keep me past up my bedtime, which is like a funny one. 3, the game had to make me put the controller down in awe. And my fourth one was, and it kind of goes with the theme of my channel, if the game had a warning, boss approaching title card screen, like when you enter a boss room and like it does like the whole warning, basically whatever, like the theme of my whole channel that I won't shut the fuck up about sometimes. If the game had that, it automatically makes my top 10 list. So that's just to keep it fun and interesting. So my 10th game of 2022. I'm going to get destroyed for this. Somerville. Somerville, developed by Jumpship, is the debut indie game from a new studio led by one of the co-founders of Playdead, of Limbo and Inside fame. While not as polished as the aforementioned title, Somerville is the type of game I wish we could get more often, although I imagine these types of games aren't easy to make. It's a minimalistic adventure game set in a sci-fi post-apocalyptic world, There's no dialogue or written text. Everything is told through environmental storytelling and audio-visual cues. If you're not familiar with the subgenre, Somerville is rooted in cinematic platformers like Out of This World or Another World, Part of Darkness, or even Flashback, otherwise known as the Book of, I think this is how you say his name, Eric Chahi? Or Eric Chahai? I think it's Eric Chahi. I'm probably butchering his name. Despite some rough edges, I really liked Somerville. There's so many moments where I put the controller down just to soak in the atmosphere, particularly due to the sound design. It's my Little Nightmares 2 of 2022, so I love Little Nightmares. If you're not familiar with that series, Little Nightmares 2 broke my top 3 last year. It's not as good as Little Nightmares, but it's also the perfect Game Pass game, as you can finish it in about 3 to 4 hours. I finished the game once, and similar to my time spent with Tunic, I've yet to see the true ending since the solution is relatively cryptic. I can't imagine these games are easy to make, but when they come around, especially if they're done right or from a studio with a pedigree for it, there's really nothing else like it. So I don't have a stream of this game. I played it offline. So yeah, this game is like inarguably like subjectively, or sorry, objectively, like kind of bad. There's definitely a lot of like, I had a few glitches. Some of like the audio, some of the visual sort of like cues that the game has like aren't great. Like it's kind of a hard game to navigate. I got stuck a few times just because I was like wasn't clear on where you had to go, and the game's like relatively linear. So, but the way this game starts like blew me away, and the sound design. If you just have a nice sound system like a speaker, 5.1 surround sound, or any if headphones even, or sound bar with a subwoofer, like max your fucking music or max your sound out and play the intro to this game. If you're not like blown away by it, I don't know what to tell you. um there's a particular moment in this game where you're going through like a county fair parking lot, and you get to a point where this giant purple light like bathes the area, and there's these umbrellas on these like sort of benches, like sort of like carnival style like beach umbrellas, like on tables where people would sit at them, and like this light and the sheer force of this light like opens and closes these umbrellas, uh, and like you have to kind of navigate through it without getting caught by the light. So it kind of plays with like shadow. There's a lot of like playing with light in this game. It's really well done when it works, or when it like is intended to work. Um, and like this, you go inside like this little trailer, and it has like kind of shutters. And when the light hits the shutters, like they shake violently, and the sound is just like the sound inside of places is dampened. Like the sound design is so fucking good in this game. And like again, there's no dialogue. There's everything's done audio visually. It's just like short and sweet, and it has such a cool setting, and like the vibe of this game is just like it's a really rough around the edges game, and I really hope they make another game, because there's a lot of what I love about this genre that's in this game, despite like all of its issues. So the reason why it's number 10 is because I didn't get the true ending. The true ending is kind of really difficult to figure out without reading a guide. So that I hate that kind of shit. It's also going to be part of the next game's sort of reasoning. So yeah, Somerville's awesome. Like another kind of like immediate way to make it on my list is if pretty much any cinematic platformer like an Inside or a Limbo type of game, if it's like decent, it's going to be on my list. I love this genre so much. So maybe it is a shotgun of indies. Number 9 is Tunic, developed by Andrew Schuldies and Company. Is a top-down Zelda-like with some cryptic puzzles akin to the type of stuff you'd find in Fez or The Witness. It's almost best if I say less about the game, as it's the type of experience that's better if you go in mostly blind. While Tunic clearly takes inspiration from a lot of classic and contemporary games, it still manages to carve out its own distinct look and feel. The soundtrack by Janice Kwan and Lifeformed is also excellent. The sound design, particularly when you're activating some sort of mechanism, shrine, or the like, is bassy and crunchy. One of the more unique aspects of Tunic is how the game teaches you how to play it. In Tunic, instead of forced tutorial windows popping up to explain things, the game gradually unfolds its mechanics and design language through an in-game manual or booklet that must be collected and pieced together page by page. These pages are in a fictional language, so nothing is deliberately explained. Instead, the player must use the images and iconography to decipher each page's purpose and meaning. Unfortunately, the true ending is difficult to achieve unless you're really tuned into some of the game's deeper mechanics, so I've yet to see it. With that said, rolling the initial credits was one of the most memorable experiences of the year. Yeah, Tunic was something else. And the only reason why it's like higher on my top 10 is because when did I stream that? The the true ending is so ridiculous. Like it's kind of pen and paper. Like you really need to be tuned into some of the design language in that game to see like the real ending. And I think that's kind of a bummer. I don't have the patience or the mind for that. But like everything leading up to that point, like this was a game that kept me up beyond when I usually stay up to play games. And very few games do that to me anymore. Like I'd rather just go to sleep and not stay up till like I can't do even like 1 or 2 a.m. Yeah, Tunic's it would have been higher if it didn't have like a ridiculous secret ending. And not that that's like a negative or like the game's fault, but it's just I'm not the type of person that's going to bust out a notepad to like sort of like dissect a game's like internal language to figure out like one more ending that might be a little bit more like of a satisfying conclusion than what I saw. But like seeing the initial credits roll, it's such a fucking memorable experience. Like it looks like a Zelda game, like a top-down, like sort of isometric Zelda style game, but it's so much more than like sort of like a Link to the Past or like a kind of old school Zelda tribute. There's so much more to this game than that. And the manual is like incredible. Like if I've got conflicted feelings on limited run games right now, but if there was ever like a physical limited edition where they could actually print the manual and have like a physical copy of it for you to have as like a collector's item or even to like look at as a source while you're playing the game, because it's all like within the game, the manual that you collect or you piece together, that would I'd buy that immediately. Yeah, well, I thought about that, but you know what they could do though? They could still give you the manual and like a collector's item that's printed, but they could put like a seal around it that says like don't break this unless you want it spoiled, or don't break the seal on the manual like until you finish the game or until you want to open it. Yeah, the fun of it is to put it together. But I think like this game's been out for almost a year, and I think if they release a collector's edition for like the really devoted fan base, because I've seen like a lot of like art books and stuff. Like some collector's edition have like those warnings, like don't open this art book if you don't want to spoil like certain characters or whatever. Like I think if they do it like that, they could get away with it and it'd be perfectly like fine. And like I said, like I think at this point, if you release a collector's edition of Tunic with like a manual printed out, that's just for like the most hardcore fan who probably figured out the true ending on their own already. So that's my at least reasoning for like I hope someone does it, because like Cuphead got a nice special edition. A lot of these like indie darlings over the past few years have gotten like nice physical prints with some cool like little collector goodies, and I think Tunic should definitely get one. But yeah, so both Somerville and Tunic, though, as much as I love them, and they're my types of games, like they're like 100% my type of games. They both have secret endings that are just like too much for my mind right now. Like they kind of make you, they really, you got to think outside of the box to access them, and they're almost like impossible without a guide. I would like, at least at my point in my life. All right, let's keep going. Number 8 is Infernax. They're developed by Berserk Studio. Is a 2D action platformer that wears its Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link and Castlevania 2: Simon's Quest inspiration very closely on its sleeve. You'll travel from one town to the next, solving simple quests for townsfolk while upgrading your character along the way. Each of the game's main dungeons rewards players with new traversal abilities, such as the ability to dash or jump higher, that culminate in challenging boss encounters. One of the most interesting aspects of Infernex, however, is its mortality or morality system. Over the course of the game, you're presented with choices that will test your moral compass, which essentially boils down to either being good or evil. These decisions ultimately impact the game's ending, but depending on the choices you make, you'll encounter different characters, enemies, and scenarios such as flooding a town by destroying a dam. There's also a day-night cycle where enemies become stronger, more frequent at night. Infernex is a complete package. The character sprites are chunky, the boss designs are disgustingly well made, the controls are tight, the pacing feels just right, and the game has multiple endings. I completed the game on classic mode, which just means reloading at a save point when you die, and saw 2 of the endings, both of which were aligned with being good. If you can only play one retro-inspired romp from 2022, I can't recommend Infernex enough. I think Infernex was in the same stream as this. I have an interesting, like, not an interesting story, but like, I started this game kind of when it came out, and I'm like, this seems okay. It just feels like one of these types of like, it's like the Astalon Tears of the Earth indie 2D like sort of Castlevania Metroid release of 2022. But I put it down for months, and then I came back to it like this past October, and I started playing it. And I kind of picked my save. I think I started over even, and I came back to it, and I couldn't stop playing it. Like I stayed up. I definitely stayed up past midnight playing this game, and it's just so. It looks. Oh, there we go. I was like, why isn't the video playing? It looks like one of those types of games. Like you could go on Steam and look and find games that probably look like this, but not all of them are going to play as like kind of as competently well made as this one is. Um, so like, and I'm kind of typically like I see something like this and I get immediately tired because I'm like I've played like hundreds of games that look like this that aren't like their respective Castlevania 2s or Zelda 2s or whatever. But this is like one of those kind of almost like Shovel Knight scenarios. Yeah, it's so Simon's Quest. It's like straight up like Castlevania 2, Keylog. Um, I think there's even hold on, there's like a tribute to it. Do I have it recorded? Is it right here? Cool death animation too. It's very gory, which I also kind of like. And you go inside and out of houses. There's like little dungeons. I was trying to find something that was really cool. Oh, here's some of the choice stuff. And you get to see some of the artwork. So like you come across this villager at night and they're asking you to kill them so you can either help them or slay them. So what did I do? Did I slay them? I don't remember what I did. Let's see how that played out. Oh, I tried to help them, but I think they turned into this like look how awesome that looks. Yeah, the character portraits in the artwork, and then the sprites, like it's just so fucking cool. Yeah. So any other that's cool, Red Flash. Like I said, like if you look at this game on the surface, or if you kind of caught your eye like in a trailer or on Steam, you'd be like, "Oh, that's just another like 2D Castlevania looking like motherfucker." But it's like it's really good. It's really worth playing. Number 7, and this meets my criteria of having a boss warning approaching screen or warning boss approaching screen. Demon Throttle is my 7th favorite game from 2022, developed by Doinksoft. It's a 2D top-down alter-scrolling arcade shooter. Interestingly enough, Demon Throttle can only be purchased physically. The initial pre-order window has since passed, but apparently only 10,000 copies were made. I was fortunate enough to secure a copy at release, and the game comes in a special package from Special Reserve Games, which even includes a manual. Demon Throttle is a classic arcade shooter through and through. It plays 2 characters that you can switch between on the fly: a gunslinger who's lost his wife, and a vampire lady who's had her chalices stolen from an evil lord. The chalices are actually a big part of accessing the game's best ending. On each of the 4 levels, a secret staircase can be found, which leads the player to an underground area where the chalices can be collected. These hidden staircases are randomly placed during each playthrough, although there's only a few spots where they can appear in each stage, so it's not exactly roguelike. It's a little roguelike-y, though, this game. I completed the game multiple times, one playthrough on hard difficulty and another run on normal with the true ending, which requires all of the chalices collected. Demon Throttle has a deceiving amount of content and replay value. The more you play the game, the more things you unlock, including a sound test of bestiary, screen borders, and even new stage variants. Demon Throttle is the ultimate just one more run type of game too, and has an amazing warning boss approaching title card sequence at the start of each boss fight. If you're familiar with my Twitch channel or any arcade shooter from the 90s, you'll know how important these types of screens are to me. And for that reason alone, Demon Throttle is one of my favorite games of the year. So I did stream this, and I'll just play it really quick. I gotta pick up the pace though, because I'm losing energy. And this is supposed to be my top 10. So let's just go straight to the warning boss screen. So yeah, it's like a 2D, like almost like mercenary style, like Capcom's Commandos or like whatever you want to call these kind of top-down alter scroller shooters. It has an amazing soundtrack. Did I get to the 4th level? Hold on. Alright, I mean, it's not really an auto fire, but you can... Here it comes.
I don't quite know if I have bombs.
Oh my god, this game's
Demon
made for it. It's got a
General.
warning screen, are you kidding me? Warning? Demon General warning approaching, or Demon General approaching. I should just made this number 1 because of this, but there's another game that has a Yep. That's my new gimmick for this channel going forward, by the way. I'm on the lookout for boss approaching screens, and there's already been I'll tell you, there's already been a game in 2023 within the first 15 days that just came out. I streamed it the other night. It has a fucking warning screen, so it's automatically going to be on my top 10. I don't give a flying shit. It's going to be there. Whatever else, Street Fighter 6, Resident Evil 4 remake, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. Do I get to the last level? Oh, no, I don't think I do. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Is this the music? Yeah, this track's incredible. It says "Let's Throttle." The sound effects kind of drown out the music, but
Music.
All right, that's Demon Throttle. Keep going. Number 6 was Stray. The Stray, developed by Blue 12 Studio, is a game where you play as a cute cat in a post-apocalyptic world that's rooted in classic adventure game elements. As someone who grew up having cats as their family pets, I knew I was going to like the game regardless. The opening chapter of Stray feels like it's straight out of a Team Eco game. There's no dialogue outside of an opening title card sequence and a really stylistic alien robot looking font, establishing that you're outside of the city's walls. The further you progress, however, the game sort of shows its classic adventure game influence as it quickly delves into a fetch quest of sorts with a lot of back and forth conversations with various NPCs. I mostly enjoyed the narrative approach, but I do understand how some people could have been disappointed with how at times it doesn't really feel like you're a cat. The game's arguably from the perspective of a little robot companion familiar who accompanies you on your quests, which again could be disappointing to those who just wanted a game solely about feline friends. One of my favorite things about games is when the developers know they've created a sense of place. At the end of Stray, to reveal that the areas you've been exploring is actually a domed city, sealed shut from the outside world. During the final gameplay sequence, you destroy a command center of sorts, and the ceiling above the city begins to open. If you look out from the big windows in this room, you can see the variety or the entirety of the city from above. Every area this is really important, every area you explored is detailed and visible below, and it feels like you're looking at a miniature diorama set of the places you've visited. The sense of scale is incredible, and as the metal plates retract, sunlight bathes the city below, and the game lets you quite literally soak in all of its glory. The entire sequence is in real time too, and you can watch the scene unfold, curled up in a ball, purring if you so choose. It was a game of the year moment for me, and months later, I still think about how impactful the whole experience was. Completing the game with all memories collected and every trophy outside of doing this speed run. I don't know. Did I stream Stray? I don't think I did. No. So Stray kind of falls in the Somerville camp. It's another sort of like cinematic platformer, or at least I would call that. Like Stray's definitely more like a traditional adventure game. And I think I wasn't super I wouldn't say I was disappointed with the direction it took, but like the game sort of like it doesn't trick you, but it sets itself up as like you're just a cat by yourself, like kind of doing like automatic platforming and some little platforming sequences. And it's very like minimalistic. There's no dialogue, obviously. And then you find a robot companion, and the game kind of turns into like this sort of like classic adventure game where you're like talking to robots and like fetching items for them and kind of solving like the problems of these like robot citizens and stuff. So like it kind of removes itself from like the whole like I'm just a cat going on an adventure by myself sort of vibe, and then it turns into something else. But um I'm obsessed. If you create your gaming like the end of this is big spoilers. The end of Stray, you get to like this command center that overlooks the city that you've been like playing through the entire time below, and every district and every area and chapter you've gone through has been like recreated you know on a smaller scale below you, and it just really kind of like honed in for me that like holy shit they had like a complete vision for this game. Like you don't make a game where like you pull out from everything you've done and kind of show you how like again like you're just a cat, and it shows you like this really tiny city that's like walled in this domed kind of you know area, and like the slums are there, like the kind of neon sort of marketplace city you can see from above. Like it's all kind of like I don't know how to describe it. It's really hard for me to put into words, but like it's such a cool moment, and it just the game soundtrack's great. And like I said, like at the beginning of it, I swore this was like it felt like a Team Eco game. Like I thought I was playing Eco or like Shadow of the Colossus, at least for the first like 20 minutes. And then like I said, it kind of turns into like a classic adventure game. Um with a lot of dialogue and like a lot of NPCs. So a little mixed on that part of it, but just by the end of it, I was like, this was like fucking awesome. Hey, Sunsnick. All right. Number five didn't make top three. I might piss people off with this as well. My fifth favorite game of 2022, kind of like begrudgingly to a degree, was Elden Ring, developed by From Software, is the latest and most ambitious Souls entry to date. It also feels like a culmination of everything From Software has been working towards since the 90s. As of late, I've had a love-hate relationship with their games. From Software is a developer that's near and dear to my heart. I have fond memories of bringing our original PlayStation to the shore so that my brother and I could play Kingsfield 2 late at night after coming back from the boardwalk. We bought a PlayStation 2 for Eternal Ring and Evergrace, From Software's not so popular PS2 launch games. We would later import Shadow Tower Abyss, the Japanese only sequel to Shadow Tower, on the PS1 so that we could utilize a fan made translation on a modded PS2 and experience it in all of its obscurity. Prior to Demon Souls or Dark Souls, From Software used to be known for a variety of games across multiple genres. During the PS2, GameCube, Xbox era, for example, we were graced with games like The Adventures of Cookie and Cream or Lost Kingdoms and Otogi. Today, From Software is a soul-pumping machine, and outside of a few experimental projects, see Deracine or Sekiro Shadows Die Twice to a lesser extent, From Software isn't the company they used to be, and for most of the community and industry at large, it appears to be for the better. The most impressive thing about Elden Ring is probably its open world and how it differs from its contemporaries. Elden Ring is essentially From Software's take, I think, on Elder Scrolls, more so than, say, Nintendo's The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild or even Guerrilla's Horizon series, which everyone can't resist making comparisons to. There are what the game considers legacy dungeons, which are essentially the size of the main areas from Demon Souls, for example, but they're integrated or placed within a much larger overworld filled with its own smaller areas, tombs, ruins, encampments, and other eye-catching landmarks. With that said, the first 30 to 50 hours or so, the developers do a good job of disguising the repeated ideas or concepts. There are these four-legged stone monuments that stomp across the land in various spots. For example, it's an incredible moment the first time you witness these monstrosities, but once you see the sixth or seventh one of these, the honeymoon phase quickly comes to an end, and then there's only pain and suffering. Sorry, I'm losing my voice because I've been talking for almost 2 hours. Elden Ring may be more approachable than some of the other games in the series. If you get lost in one area or if you're struggling at a particular boss, you have many more options in terms of finding something else to do. But at some point, you have to defeat some of the main bosses in order to proceed, and like any other Souls game, it's not easy. I completed the game at level 147 with nearly 110 hours logged and covered most of the map and beat all of the secret bosses that netted trophies. I did as many of the side quests as I could and did not resort to a guide until I reached the end of the game just to see what I could mop up before attempting the final boss. I earned the Elden Lord ending and nearly met all of the conditions for one of the secret endings. So I don't think no, I didn't stream Elden Ring. I wanted to. I wanted to do like an Elden Ring and Forbidden West stream where I kind of compared the two, but I just didn't happen last year. But yeah, like I don't want to hold this against Elden Ring itself because it's not like the game's fault with how I feel about their games, but like, and this doesn't really, again, this is not really like part of the game's quality or anything, but like I grew up, I like literally like legit grew up with From Software, and I think it's amazing that like playing Kingsfield and some of the Armored Core games back on PS1 and then following them to PS2, like their games would score and perform poorly, like back in the day, and no one would talk about them. Magazines gave them all shitty scores, and that could be argued for their time. Maybe they weren't that great. They were really rough around the edges, compared to like a lot of games coming out at the time. But they always had the feeling of Elden Ring was always there, dating back to Kingsfield, and to me it's always been a little frustrating that like just now they're getting their praise. But I don't want to be one of those like gatekeeper type of people. So like I just think it's incredible that like for me personally, growing up with Kingsfield and old From Software games, having just my brother to talk to and maybe one other weird friend that we grew up with, and then like maybe a dozen or so people on like the game facts message board. So like when forums were the way to communicate with people, not like Twitter or Twitch or anything. Like people who played Evergrace on PlayStation 2, which is like, you know, arguably like a horrible From Software game, but like we bought it at launch when we got our PS2 and we were obsessed with it because we're like, this is so much like better looking than Kingsfield. Like like we're playing a PlayStation 2. Like this is incredible. Eternal Ring, their first person sort of Kingsfield successor, was like 60 frames per second, I think, on PlayStation 2. It felt incredible. It was like Kingsfield was like 10 frames per second on PlayStation 1. Um, but so like to go for me to kind of live in have gone through a life where like I was playing their games and had no one to talk to seeing From Software games like, you know, at the Keeleys, like on Jeff Keeley's on the fucking Game Awards, and like they're selling millions of copies now, and like, you know, everyone's playing their games. Like they're like Elden Ring's not quite like Call of Duty status, but like from my understanding, it like sold almost as well as like, I could be wrong, a Call of Duty game. Like it's ridiculous how well these games are doing, especially Elden Ring. But like to me, it's just like, I don't know. I don't want to say I saw through the veil quickly, but I'm like, this is Demon Souls, and I like Demon Souls. Like I said, I love From Software. Their games speak to me like on a ton of different levels, but this is literally Demon Souls, and I don't want to like kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Take away like the new things it's doing, but like it's really just Demon Souls like in an open, or Dark Souls in a bigger space. But I will say I was blown away by like Boletaria, I think, from Demon Souls, for example, like, you know, 1-1 or 1-2, 1-3, 1-4. Like the dungeons that you warp to in Demon Souls, they're like just placed down in the overworld in Elden Ring, and that blew me away. So anytime you like walked into a new like part of the map and you saw how big it was and how the game just kept going, I'm like, how do they make a game this big? And all of that stuff I you know, I applaud and like appreciate. And as much as I kind of complained playing through this game at times, I'm just like, I don't know if I'm built for like 100+ hour games anymore, and it just never ended. And by the time I got to the end, I'm just like, let me summon people in, because I just want to see, like, I just want to I want the credits to roll. Like I was getting tired of it. So I think there can be a case where there's like too much game, and I think Elden Ring, there's too much of it, but it also, I guess it kind of had to be what it was, whatever their vision was for it. Uh, but those are my general thoughts on it. So for me, Elden Ring just made me think about like where From Software was and where they are now, and I found that more interesting than like playing the game itself, I guess. So that's why it's kind of like kind of placed in the middle of my top 10 list, because I'm like really split on it. Like I have to recognize like what it did, like what it does or what it did, and how kind of monumental of a release it was. Um, but at the same time, I'm kind of like almost how I feel about God of War or even Horizon. Like, do I need another Souls game after this? Would I play one? Sure, but like, do we really need like an Elden Ring 2 that's another fucking 110-hour plus map to like walk out to a plateau and then there's like 10 ridiculous bosses to fight? Like, I mean, that sounds really cool, but like, I don't know. So that's my thoughts on Elden Ring. All right, number 4, Soul Cresta. Now, I literally stayed up till like 1 a.m. playing this. Developed by Platinum Games and Hamster, is a sequel to the 1980s cult classic arcade shooter Terra Cresta and Moon Cresta. The main gameplay gimmick mechanic that separates Soul Cresta from other arcade shooters is its formations. Once you've assembled your 3 ships together, you can collect formation chips, which grant you the ability to transform into different attack variations. While it doesn't seem like these formations are required to engage with on the lower difficulties, they definitely give the player the upper hand. These formations almost act like a traditional screen clearing bombs in other arcade shooters, but you have much more control over them. There are 5 formation total, and the chips are color coded with a secret powerful formation that becomes available once you unlock the others. Your ships are blue, red, and yellow, and there are special enemies and crates that can only be destroyed by the same colored firepower. There's even special rings to fly through, which grant the player more bonus points if you fly through them with the correct colored ship. Giant rocks and meteors, for example, are destroyed more easily with the yellow ship, as its missiles are drill-like weapons. So I get like kind of nitty-gritty with the details there. I played through normal difficulty stage by stage until I got to the final level. After I beat the final boss and the credits rolled, the game automatically loops, like most arcade shooters, you back to the restart of the game on the next difficulty. For whatever reason, although I was exhausted from beating my head against a wall during the final boss on normal, I decided I would keep playing until I lost all of my lives, as my high score carried over from the previous run. Nearly an hour later and well after midnight, I played through the entirety of hard difficulty in another sitting and unlocked platinum hard mode. I eventually ran out of steam by the second level in this difficulty. Oops, typo. But I just couldn't stop playing, and I would have kept going if I had the energy for it. Soul Cresta had its hooks in me, and I finally understood how to play the game. Although there's a ton of replay incentive in the base game, the dramatic story DLC is a tough sell. For $10, you play through the same levels that are available in arcade mode, but with a few extra twists. And I just keep talking about it. For one, there's Japanese VO and cutscenes that make an attempt at telling a story. It's mostly anime space opera nonsense, but it's the same banter chatter you'd hear when playing through a mission from Platinum Games' very own The Wonderful 101. And the problem, however, is that unless you can understand the Japanese language, it's nearly impossible to pay attention to the dialogue in the upper right or left corners of the screen. All of the dialogue is located underneath the character portraits, and when you're playing an intense arcade shooter, it doesn't really lend itself to reading unless you're the master at hand-eye coordination and multitasking. It also appears that the story mode stages an additional slow-moving. It also appears that the story mode stages add additional slow-moving, less enemy-populated sequences during most of the cinematics, so the new players couldn't reasonably play and read at the same time. It still would have been nice to have English VO, but perhaps it wasn't in the budget, although they did charge $10 for this, so what gives? The final boss in the DLC is much more difficult than the regular game, so I'm glad I powered through and saw the true ending. Soul Cresta is one of my favorite games of the year, and it's a shame Platinum Games has had such a poor image lately due to Babylon's Fall and the PR leading up to Bayonetta 3's release, because this game is genuinely good and worth your time. Yeah, so I did have let me just find it because it does have a boss warning approaching screen, so it automatically makes my list. When did I stream that? It was a while back. 10 months ago. This wasn't even like a real boss. I think this game is a boss screen, right? Hold on. I mean, if you know my channel well enough, you know I love these types of games. And this was such an approachable arcade shooter, or top-down arcade shooter, and it has a wild history. Like, the fact that this is like a straight-up sequel to like a 1980s sort of lost arcade shooter with like a continued story that takes place kind of canonically, I think. Like, it's ridiculous.
Cool.
This is the boss. Here we go. This is our second warning screen. A big enemy is approaching at full throttle. There is a huge hostile reaction. Intercept it with a perfect attitude, ready to fire, is what it says. So, let's get the fuck out of here, stuff. So again, I'm obsessed with boss screens. If your game has a warning, boss approaching, I'm gonna play it. So yeah, Soul Cresta doesn't it, again, it kind of looks like any other arcade shooter you can find. But it's like I said, like it was a new release. It was the first platinum game of 2022, which was followed by Babylon's Fall and then Bayonetta 3. And if you like the genre, and I know it's not the most approachable genre, but it's probably like one of the most approachable games in the genre currently, at least, because you can continue from levels that you unlock. You don't have to finish the game in one sitting. There's multiple difficulty levels. There's a lot of unlockables, and the whole ship formation stuff, which is a kind of like an evolution to what the original like arcade games had. Um, Terra Cresta and Moon Cresta. Oh yeah, it's not even close to like a treasure game difficulty like Ikaruga or Radiant Silvergun. Um, you collect like you have one ship and you collect kind of pieces to it, and the pieces, like depending on the formations you make, give you different like attack capabilities, like a wave attack or a wave beam or like a you know missiles or something like that. It's like it's really it once you learn how to play it, it's impossible. At least for me, it was hard for me to stop playing. And when I finished it, like I said, the game sort of just loops back to the beginning, and you carry over whatever power ups you had when you beat the final boss, and it puts you on the next highest difficulty. And there's like trophies for each difficulty. So I'm like, fuck it, like I'm fully powered and I'm on like a high for finishing this game. So I just kept going and I finished it like twice in two sittings, or in one sitting twice in a row. And I can't say that for a lot of games this year. So, and I met a really random person who found me on PSN, and they were playing this game and they sent me a message, and all throughout the year they were updating me on like their platinum trophy progress, and like months would go by, and then like randomly over the summer I never talked to this person ever in my life other than that I guess they saw me on the leaderboards or something, and they sent me a message saying like I got my platinum, and we had just like this really like you know innocent exchange of text of like yeah this game's so fucking cool and like good luck and congrats on your platinum, and like we never talked about anything else. It was so weird. um but and they like of course their PSN like profile page, it was all like platinum games and like character action games. Like he had whoever they were, he or she, like they had like they had black they had Babylon's Fall platinums, they had Vanquish platinums, Bayonetta platinum, like their first Bayonetta game, like the kind of shitty port that's on PS4. It was ridiculous. It was like just a hardcore like lost person out in the world who's just playing like difficult tough games and just looking for other people to talk to him about. So I was really, it was a cool moment for the year. Yeah, there's people out there like me, I guess. Unfortunately or fortunately. All right, Soul Cresta, number 4. So now we're at our top 3. I'm almost out of. I'm running. I didn't want this to go as long as it did, but it just worked out that way. So I tried to keep my top 5 kind of balanced, like a mix of like, well, you'll see. But so my third favorite game of 2022 was A Plague Tale Requiem. So A Plague Tale Requiem, developed by Asobo Studio. Let me take a drink, my voice. Is a sequel to A Plague Tale Innocence. Similar to games like Uncharted and The Last of Us, A Plague Tale is a third-person action-adventure game with a strong emphasis on story and characters. Requiem, similar to the first game, takes place during the French Inquisition and the Black Plague. With each new generation, always been about more pixels, polygons, higher frame rates, and better visuals. At the launch of the PS4, for example, I kind of go on a weird tangent here. Knack and Resogun were conversation pieces for the simple fact that they had a ton of polygons and pixel-like voxels on display, respectively. I never thought a generation later that the amount of rats on screen would be the next milestone in showcasing new hardware, yet here we are. The rats are back in A Plague Tale Requiem, and they're everywhere, but this time you have more tools to deal with them. When the game is not funneling the player from one rat-infested encounter to the next, you'll have the opportunity to explore the environment, find hidden items, discover side quests, and listen to additional dialogue that helps flesh out the world and its characters. If you've played Innocence, Requiem plays more or less the same. While Plague Tale is arguably a stealth game at its core, you do have a variety of weapons at your disposal, including a crossbow, slingshot, and alchemy-related items. The biggest addition to the combat system is that you can now possess the rats to do your bidding. You can also kick enemies into piles of rats if you've unlocked the appropriate ability. Plague Tale Requiem does something smart with its character progression. Although they've introduced a variety of skill trees for Amicia, How you unlock new skills feels extremely organic compared to its contemporaries. Instead of pumping experience or skill points into your character's skill trees like in other games, you'll naturally gain experience during combat encounters based on how you approach each scenario. So if you stealth your way through a combat section, for example, you'll gain more abilities that make sneaking more efficient. Although there is a menu that shows your progress, there's no experience bars or a visual indicator filling up the screen while you play, so the immersion is rarely broken. It's actually really cool. That might have been a little wordy, like how I read that or how I tried to describe it. I'll explain it and again in a second. Requiem also looks like a true next gen game, and while it has incredible art direction, the game still feels like structured like a game from the last generation or two. Just like the first game, the sequel is still chapter based, complete with a chapter select so that you can return to previous levels for missed collectibles. Some chapters are longer than others, but the game is quite lengthy and paced fairly well. During most chapters, big metal doors separate one major encounter from the next, and the sequence becomes a bit repetitive and predictable further you progress. There's also a lot of sequences where you're shimmying through small crevices, which from an armchair perspective feels like they're used to mask loading times. From an environmental artist point of view, however, these sequences funnel the player into some beautifully shot visuals, and the game is simply gorgeous. I spoil the next game a little bit. A Plague Tale Requiem is one of my favorite games of the year. It's one of the few games in 2022 that made me put the controller down just to soak in the atmosphere. The game is gorgeous, the cast and performances are stellar, the set pieces are impressive, and the combat is more refined than its predecessor. It also helps that Olivier de Riviere once again did an amazing job with the soundtrack. Probably butchered his name again. I completed the game on hard difficulty, but didn't collect or upgrade everything there was to do. The ending was quite depressing, however, they clearly leave the story open for future games. There's a new Game Plus mode to tackle down the road, so I'll definitely be taking another trip with Amicia and Hugo sometime soon, which I probably won't considering my backlog. But yeah, I wanted to like read a lot for that game or include a lot of my writing for that game. So like to me, A Plague Tale sort of occupies the same space as like God of War Ragnarok does. It's like a cinematic character action, not character action, but like character driven, over the shoulder, like third person action adventure game. And I much enjoyed my time with The Plague Tale than God of War, even though they're different types of games, but they still kind of arguably fall within the same genre. Um, where's my Plague Tale shit? I also love games like this too. Let me just go back. And this was a game that like the combat portions aren't like the best. It's sort of like mostly a stealth game, even though you do have a bow and a slingshot. You can kind of like commando like brute force like approach enemies. But it's mostly like a narrative driven sort of like think of like the Uncharted walking sections. Like when Uncharted's not like, a cover shooter game, it breaks down to moments like this where you're kind of like exploring environments with people. Love games about vermin plagues that killing people off. Wait, what's the other game? Elden Ring? Or there's a lot of games about like vermin killing people or diseases and plagues and shit. Um, this game just looks gorgeous, and it's the type of game where like there were so many moments where I just stopped and sat and listened to the like the ambience, and as simple as that sounds, like this marketplace, just hearing all the chatter and everything, like it's stuff that other games have done before. It's not like new to anything. Yeah, and I like it's not a fun game to play during the pandemic. Um, sorry, hold on. But like all of the kind of like immersive sort of like character moments in this game just like completely like did it for me. Like there were so many parts where I just stopped, put the controller down, just kind of like soaked in the atmosphere and the ambiance, and like I both these games I really like. I think this is like one of the best new kind of IPs. Like if you want to talk about like Uncharted or Last of Us types of games, I think Plague Tale is like the one to kind of like the underdog to watch out for. It's kind of why I chose it, or why like I ranked it so high, is because like I do feel pretty passionate about this series. Um, the music's incredible too. The composer actually worked on Streets of Rage 4, which is wild. That it's the same composer that did the music for this game, or at least one of the composers for Streets of Rage 4 did the music for Plague Tale, both Plague Tale games. But anyway, if you like Uncharted or The Last of Us, like that type of game, like story driven, character driven, over the shoulder sort of action adventure game, like combat, but then exploration and kind of like walk and talk moments, you got to play a Plague Tale. Like it's so underrated. No one, like so many few people, like on all of the Game of the Year podcasts and conversations were like, "Oh, I heard great things about a Plague Tale. Like I wish someone played it, or I wish I played it. Like I really wanted to get back to it, or like no one was talking about it." I'm like, "No, like everyone's missing out." And maybe it's not for everyone. I don't know, but it looks in. There's so many shots for this game. Looks incredible. See if I can find. Oh, is this where you walk out? Yeah, that's fair. So a lot of the combat's like very like The Last of Us. Like you can stealth attack enemies if you sneak your way around the combat, or you can like attack them brute force or whatever. But trying to find like a particular vista from this. I feel like it was around here. Oh, there it was. Like look at this shit. Like a really slow moving chapter. Where these
This
chapters are
game
very
does
beefy.
is the best at funneling you
I'm
into like
complaining,
the
I'm
most
just
beautiful shots like in any fucking
Oh my
game.
god, this view! Look at these.
Oh, Lord. It's a whole city.
Whoa!
He's in that tower. He has to be.
Has to. Lucas, crossing this mess won't be easy or quick.
It's the order. A High Magister would just live in a high tower, no?
Let's just get there.
Oh my god! Look at this shot. And this whole town is like death.
See, so I just stood here and just like looked around for like a few
walls,
minutes.
like in that pretty part of the harbor we sailed into, where the people were. I told you this game was gonna get fucked very quickly.
Yeah, I
It's like a
love
lot
it,
like the
Silent
first one.
Snake. I mean, I'm kind of like biased with this series. I think this is one of the
I
best
can't get
new
over the way
IPs we've
this
had
looks.
like this past generation.
And I know
And,
a lot
like,
of it's kind of just visual, like background. Like you're not gonna explore this whole
The
city.
the art
obviously.
direction
It's
and
not like an open world game that has this.
yeah,
level
the
of
first game I really like the
fidelity,
first game too. I think this
uh,
game's way better than the first game.
but pouring the rest of my Pepsi.
I mean, I am too,
um,
Keylok. I'm very jaded.
holy
But there's
shit.
there's still like shit. Yeah, I know. I'm with you. Um,
See
You sure
that?
about this?
yeah, I know what you mean. I have ups and downs and moments with all of it. Like some days I'm just like I'm super passionate about something and I will kind of want to like, shout about it and like not shut the fuck up about it. And then other days I'm like, I'm just like everything does suck, but uh, I don't know. There's still games that like really speak to me, and I think a Plague Tale like I just think it's special. I don't know what else to say about it. All right, my number 2 game of the year. Maybe not surprising, and I debated this. My top 3, my top 5, I switched around up until like last night, honestly. So again, just to kind of circle back to um, like how ranking doesn't really matter, or how numbered lists are just like fun and silly and arbitrary, and they don't really mean a whole lot. But I really like Kirby and the Forgotten Land was like one of my favorite playthroughs of anything this year. Um, the Kirby and the Forgotten Land, developed by HAL Laboratory, is the latest installment in the long-running franchise. I never thought I'd be doing perfect dodges into counterattacks in a Kirby title, like it's some character action game. But here we are. Kirby has tiptoed around the third dimension on a few outings, whether it was the 2.5D found in Kirby 64 or the top-down 3D perspective of Kirby Blowout Blast on the 3DS. The Pink Puff hasn't fully committed to a proper 3D adventure game until now. With that said, the game is still very much level-based, and the stages feel more like something out of Super Mario 3D World than, say, Super Mario 64 or even Odyssey, outside of the game being fully 3D. The biggest draw in Forgotten Land is Kirby's new power called Mouthful Mode. Similar to how Mario uses his cap to absorb the powers of enemies, objects, and things in Odyssey, Kirby can simply inhale special items and take advantage of their properties. Take a traffic cone, for example. When Kirby devours the cone, it grants him the ability to hop along and use that tip of the cone to break cracks in the environment in order to access new areas or solve simple puzzles. Like most Kirby games, the challenging content is found in the post-game, and defeating the true final boss was such a memorable experience. I completed Kirby and the Forgotten Land and 100% enjoyed every second of it. Yeah, like the more I thought about it, I'm like, so again, 3D platformers. If you're not, I guess I have a lot of favorite types of games, but like my top 3 favorite types of games you could say are character action games, 3D platformers, and like, well, they're my top 2. I'm kind of torn between saying like cinematic platformers, like, you know, the Insides, the Limbos, the Heart of Darkness, the Somerville type of games, or like the narrative driven, like Last of Us style, the over the shoulder, like the God of War style, like third person action adventure games like the Dead Spaces, the Last of Us, the post RE4 types of games, whatever you want to like categorize those types of games. Those are also my favorite kind of games. The 3D platformers and platformers in general, like, are like just my favorite things ever. So the fact that Kirby finally jumped to 3D is like a pretty big deal. And I did have some. When did I play this? I have footage of fighting. What was it, the true final boss? Fighting the true final boss was so fucking cool in the arena. This is major endgame spoilers for Kirby. And I always find it like funny, people like criticize Kirby for it being too easy or whatever, and it's like, I'm like, dude, every Kirby game, like since a certain one, I don't know which one started it, any game that has like the boss rushes, like the end game unlockable content in Kirby games are like ridiculous, and they're always pretty challenging. And this was like not easy. If you wanted to do like 100% the game and fight the true final version of the boss, like it wasn't like, even with the items you can equip, it wasn't that like, it was pretty tough. And I think the fully upgraded astronaut laser is like the most powerful and like ideal weapon to use in the game. But like, not like, not only did we get a Kirby, like a 3D platformer Kirby game that like worked and like felt good and was competently made and like had everything you would want from like a, you know, a premium first party Nintendo game, on top of it, you know, still feeling like a Kirby game. Yeah, I remember you telling me that, Keylog. That sounded really cool because I only played this by myself. But yeah, playing this with someone else probably was really fun. Um, but so not only was it like near flawless transition to 3D, um, it had like there's perfect dodges. It has like character action game elements where you can like perfect dodge enemy attacks, and it does like almost like a Bayonetta style witch time, and you can do counter attacks off of that. Like you have a different, like if I don't know if I get to show it here, but like you can perfect dodge like projectiles and then like do a quick shot. It's like this burst shot afterwards, and I'm like, how is that in this? Like how have we arrived at that with Kirby? And this is just like classic like end game Kirby shit. Yeah, there it was. See, I'm perfect dodging through um the waves, like the red waves. Yeah, if you have witch time, your game is definitely an insta 10. So Smash Canonicals, he learned it, or Kirby learned it from Bayonetta. I like that actually. Yeah, it's actually really cool. By fighting Bayonetta so much in Smash Brothers, Kirby learned the perfect dodge. And then, like true Nintendo fashion, where do I have it here somewhere? And you got your like room you can decorate, and you get picture frames for everything that you complete in the game. Like, come on. Where's that 100% screen? Because this is like classic Nintendo shit. Like this is like classic Nintendo stuff when you 100% like a Nintendo, like a Mario or like a platformer game that they make, and they give you like a screen saying you like did everything. When do I? Oh, here it is. I think I filled out the. I've got all the figures in the game, and it gives you like a splash screen. So here's my other like funny sort of automatic criteria requirement for making my top 10 list. If your game does this, in addition to warning boss approaching screens, if your game gives you 100% clear congratulations like art screen like this, then get the fuck out of here. You're going on my top 10. Yeah, so like my only criticism of Kirby is that I think, and I saw someone else say this, so uh I might be like kind of echoing their sentiment. Like I think Kirby lost maybe a little bit of its identity, but kind of the mouthful mode copy ability stuff does feel very Mario Odyssey. And I think even though Kirby still has like the traditional transformation copy abilities by sucking up enemies, I think like him turning into like a million different things kind of feels a little Odyssey like, and kind of loses some of Kirby's identity, maybe just arguably to a degree. Not something I 100% agree with, but I definitely understand like why someone would say that. But you turn into like a car, and there's like racetrack levels, a vending machine, a light bulb to like light up like dark cave levels. Like it's just so it's like classic Nintendo creative shit. So even if like it does lose its identity just a little bit by kind of copying some of Mario Odyssey's steam a little bit, um, it's just it was so fun, and I couldn't stop playing it till I did everything. All right, are we ready for your number one so I get canceled or whatever? I don't know. So let's sum it up before I go to my number one. So again, top 10 lists are silly, they're fun. On any given day or week, my feelings about a lot of these games could shift their positions. So second favorite game of the year was Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Third was Plague Tale Requiem. 4 was Soul Cresta. 5th was Elden Ring. 6th was Stray. 7th was Demon Throttle. 8 was Infernax. 9 was Tunic. 10th was Somerville. And then my honorable mentions were yeah. Tinykin, Splatoon 3, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Ghostwire Tokyo, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shredder's Revenge, Neon White, Sonic Frontiers, Hell Pie, and Scorn. With a kind of shout out to Ease 9, Monstrum Nox, and Devotion for being games I started and finished in 2022 that didn't release in 2022 that I really liked and loved. If Devotion was a 2022 game, it probably would have been top 3 because Devotion is incredible. And then a special shout out to Klonoa, the Fantasy Reverie series. Again, I did not want to include this in any ranking or position because they're older games. So even though they're kind of remakes of the Wii release of the original game, at least, even though Klonoa 2 was getting its first sort of remake in a sense, it didn't feel right to include those or take a slot anywhere else. But Klonoa also, if these games came out for the first time this year, it would be number 1 probably because I love Klonoa to death. All my fucking channel emojis or emotes or whatever on here are like Klonoa based. So what's my number 1? What's missing? Keylok, you can probably guess. I joked about it. What have I been talking about this whole time? And what's missing from this list? Not even an honorable mention. No, Babylon's Fall didn't make any kind of list. My favorite game of 2022, and my favorite game of 2022, whether it's sad to say or not, down in my heart, I ultimately felt, what did I blast my speakers and like increase the volume on my TV for nearly like the entire time I was playing it? More so than even Somerville. This is Bayonetta 3. Not Cruising. Cruising didn't come out this year, so we weren't lucky to be graced by that. All right, so Bayonetta, I'll just read through what I have. Bayonetta 3, developed by Platinum Games, is a long-awaited, highly anticipated sequel fans have been waiting for. Right out of the gate, it's clear that Platinum Games had a lot of confidence and passion for what they were creating. Each game in the series has always had an over-the-top, big set-piece style introduction sequence. Bayonetta 3 is no different. The game starts strong and it rarely pumps the brakes. The music is incredible. I know, I have opinions about it too. I'll get to it. I'll say my piece and then we'll go from there. The music is incredible. The combat is arguably better than it's ever been. The set pieces are super ambitious and the enemies are still introduced and encapsulated in a classy looking bestiary of sorts, which is a really particular thing to say. With that said, after a very long development cycle and some PR drama leading up to the release of the game, Bayonetta 3 delivers and provides a satisfying conclusion, but not without a few missteps along the way. I think one of Bayonetta 3's biggest problems is that it feels like it's trying to do too much, and by no fault to the developer, it also feels like it's limited by the hardware of choice. Bayonetta 3 is both a multiverse and globe-trotting game. Similar to the previous games, Bayonetta 3 reaches its climax 4 to 5 times over the course of its 20-some chapters. Every 4 chapters has the player visiting new locations around the world, meeting new Bayonettas with their own personalities and weapons, culminating in epic boss fights that each feel like final bosses from any other game. The combat is still at its best when you're playing as Bayonetta, but this time you can call kaiju-like demons to fight alongside you. While the screen can feel busy and cluttered at times, incorporating giant beasts into Bayonetta's traditional character action game combat was so eloquently implemented, and no one but Platinum Games could have pulled it off. Bayonetta 3 is incredibly ambitious, and I feel that it deserves to be praised for the risks it took. It's clear that Platinum Games had to make some concessions when bringing Bayonetta back to the Switch, unfortunately. The environments can look a little drab or colorless, but it's not without some great art or cinematic direction. Yuji Shimomura company did an amazing job with the cutscenes and cinematic choreography in Bayonetta 3. Every time Bayonetta and company are on screen, you can't look away. Despite some of the bland environments, the artist did a decent job highlighting certain areas to cover the blemishes. For example, like the smoke coming out of the destroyed buildings in the Tokyo chapters, they have streaks of neon green running through them, which gives the destruction some extra flair. Can we also talk about the amazing soundtrack, specifically the battle theme? Every time it starts, it sends chills down my spine and fills me with adrenaline. I can't not play this game unless my speakers are blasting. Bayonetta 3 introduces a new playable character, Viola, who is simply a not as fun to play Nero from the more recent Devil May Cry games. She's sort of a wannabe Travis Touchdown from No More Heroes, who doesn't feel as snappy as Bayonetta. Her witch time also requires an almost perfect parry to initiate, which can lead to some extremely frustrating moments during combat, especially if you're trying to complete all of the optional challenges, challenge verses. So in pure Platinum Games fashion, there are also a ton of alternative gameplay modes, mini games spread throughout the campaign, including a scenario where you play as Jean and a sort of 2D espionage-like series of missions. None of these side diversions are necessarily bad, and none of it compares to the horribly dated QTEs from the first game that could ruin an entire pure Platinum run of a mission. But most fans just wanted more Bayonetta, and she's surprisingly not as present here. Platinum Games has been carrying a particular torch from their PS2, Capcom Clover Studios era, I'm going to say days. And it's a flame that I can't quite put out. Even with all of its missteps and questionable decisions, Bayonetta 3 kept me up past my bedtime, and as a mid-30s something, I can't say that for a lot of games today. The final sequence and ending left me a bit choked up and teary-eyed for reasons I won't spoil here, but the future looks bright for Bayonetta and friends, and I can't wait to see where they go next with the franchise. So, where's my... I did kind of struggle making Bayonetta 3 my number one pick for the year, but when I really thought about it, it's the game that, like... Where's this intro? Character action games are like my favorite types of games. So by default, I was already really gonna like love this. But like, all right, this intro. Again, it's something they've been doing since the first Bayonetta. It's something that's kind of like Platinum Games like style of presentation. And it's also very like former Capcom days. But the this game's intro. Whoa, Astral Chain more than Bayonetta 3? I wouldn't disagree with that. I could see that. This intro though just like completely blew me away. It's exactly what I wanted.
Cutscene.
Let me lower this a little bit.
I think it's Shimomura is the cinematics director. I think it'll come up.
Like the Sega logo, this Nintendo logo on the side that pops out. Classy. It's so classy. The Platinum Games logo, I love. Like if you're gonna introduce your game like this, you've got confidence and you've got like a lot to say, I think.
Star logo, Team Little Angels. The soundtrack is...
This is the kind of shit that I love like about games in general. Like give me this kind of presentation and I'm like floored and I'm like already bought in like immediately. So that's what I love about like Platinum and what they do with their games is that they have like, you know, putting their creators on like into the background. Like again, the first Bayonetta did this with the Tombstones, and then Bayonetta 2 did it with something else I forget. But I love the cutscene direction. And even if Bayonetta is a little like more soulless in this game compared to the previous games, like I just I loved seeing her again, and even with the different voice actress and all that shit surrounding that drama, like I just was like I was bought in immediately, and I'm like, you know what? No other game this year is making me feel the way this game's making me feel, and maybe it's just reminding me of like my youth and like growing up with Devil May Cry and that kind of like Capcom attitude that it has. And it's a really hard thing to describe. Like just the presentation and the feel of Bayonetta 3 is sort of like encapsulates a certain part of my youth that I can't let go of. And it's like an attitude. It's like a certain it's like a confident attitude that like they know that they're the shit and they know that they're making some of the best games out there. And like even if they don't sell well, they just keep doing it. So it has, I guess it's kind of like a punk rock attitude or to a degree, just like fuck what everyone else is doing. We're just gonna make what we want to make. That's what Bayonetta feels like to me. Like it's carrying a torch that they don't want to put out for better or worse. And just to get to it really quick. And I do like Astro Chain a lot. Like this boat sequence and then this battle track is like incredible.
Yeah, just their cutscene and art direction again switches so, you know.
Like who else is making cutscenes like this?
Like if the right team is working on it, like they can just make some really good scenes still. I'm obsessed with everything about this. This is a cutscene
And
style
it
that's
feels
lost.
dated, but like again, it's dated in a way that speaks to me, that's important to me, and that like
And Capcom still to a
it just
degree
reminds me of the games I grew up with or that were like really sort of impactful like in my
looking for
sort of like teenager years.
this energy or this like
Like the Statue of Liberty pose, like come on.
it's just the style. It's so stylish.
Let me get to like when the battle track kicks in.
Here's a friendly hello.
I swear, this giant fish creature is like a homage or like a reference to like G Darius or Darius shooters. It's got like shoot 'em up, giant fish, giant flying fish, sort of battleship vibes that like I wouldn't be surprised considering it's Platinum Games.
I do hope you haven't forgotten my
There's like
order.
a shoot 'em up, arcade shoot 'em up sort of influence on some of the enemy designs here.
Yeah,
It's just so ridiculous.
it does need to be on a new hardware. They need to move on to
Designs
like
are
the next Nintendo
so
platform. But
good.
this battle track, the way they introduced this
there's a
song, oh my god, I'm
cohesion to
obsessed.
these-
Oh,
I
let
gotta
me just talk about this really quick.
Holy shit.
I'm obsessed with this shit. Bayonetta 1 did it, or kind of started it, with the book that encapsulates like the angels that come down. So all the enemy introductions are like, so this is like an equivalent to my boss warning screens because it's sort of like introducing an enemy or a boss character with sort of like a splash title card screen. So it's different, but it kind of falls in that same camp as like the warning screen. So that's ultimately why it's my number one. Kind of like it snuck its way in there, sort of. But like no other games
Ridiculous.
are throwing enemies at you and then they freeze it and then they give like meaning and like background to the enemies that you're fighting like this like so like the wall, the little scroll and how it like zooms, it just folds up and then like swipes away at the screen. It's just like Jesus Christ. And like what I love about all Bayonetta games is like all of the enemies are like part of some kind of hierarchy, or there's like a structure to their inner ranking like within like the game's universe. And I haven't even read all the enemy descriptions. I bet they're really cool because they're always really interesting. Like all the lore books you can pick up and all the enemy kind of bios that you can read in Bayonetta games is always really fucking cool. But that shit that Bayonetta does with those enemy introductions, that's also one of the reasons why like I'm obsessed with it. Is the track starting yet? Probably not. Here we go. This battle track's get the fuck out of here. This soundtrack is get the fuck out of here. Like, when I was watching this, I thought to myself, like, hey, everything's gonna be okay. That's how this game made me feel. I'm just gonna let it play out of respect until it transitions smoothly to the combat. Oh, can't deal with it.
But ill-behaved tourists can be quite a pain.
Yeah, yeah, even with the ending, it felt like everything was gonna be okay. Oh, look at that! Let's see how hard Expert is. In the set piece, like, you're on a giant, like, yacht boat, and there's, like, fucking tidal waves. Like, you're, like, surfing on a giant wave in, like, the middle of New York. Like, come on. Like, honestly, God of War Ragnarok was missing... I'm sorry, God of War Ragnarok was missing shit like this. Like, why wasn't the serpent doing fucking crazy shit? Like, why aren't we riding on the back of that Jormungandr or whatever the fuck that thing's name is in God of War Ragnarok? Like, where was all that kind of crazy shit? Like, it was so... And I know different tone, different, like, Bayonetta is supposed to be over the top and ridiculous and crazy, but, like, for a game to speak to me or for me to get excited about, like, certain games, there needs to be, like, a certain energy level that's met at this point in my life. And Bayonetta, like, meets and exceeds that energy level, like, every fucking time. And, like, I don't know. Like, every other game this year was just missing that, like, kind of, like, holy shit, like, this is what I remembered liking about games. And that's on top of, like, again, it's Devil May Cry, Bayonetta combat. It's tried and true. It's a sort of a formula at this point. But, like, you introduce giant kaiju monsters seamlessly into combat. As messy as it is, I definitely understand that. That's arguable, like, whether that was a good decision or not. I do kind of miss the simplicity of, like, the older Bayonetta gameplay. But, like, all of the locations you go to, all the Bayonettas you meet, all the weapon options and everything, like, all of that makes, like, a character action game good. All that stuff's there, like, all the difficulties and unlocks and everything. But even, like, all the exploration shit, like, running around as all the different transformations, like, I feel like there's elements of all of Platinum's and even some of, like, the older Capcom games that they've worked on are, like, all in this game. Like, like, some of the animals that you can rescue, like all the frogs and, like, the crows and the cats that run around the environment that are, like, the bewitchments or whatever that you can collect. Those reminded me of, like, parts of, like, little shades of Okami. There's, like, Wonderful 101 sort of elements in here with all the kind of, like, set piece stuff where the highways are bending and all the environments are kind of twisting and, like, deforming in real time. Like, they're definitely pushing, like, the Switch tech to, like, pretty, like, limits here, I think. And like you said, Keylog, it is super frustrating because it's stuck on, like, old hardware that's, like, showing its age for sure. But I don't know. Bayonetta 3 just it just spoke to me. Despite all of its problems and all of the shit surrounding its release, it was just my favorite game of the year. I'll just leave it on that freeze frame of her. All right, that's all I got. I can leave it off with see you next year. So, Bayonetta 3, my game of the year for 2022. Top 3, Bayonetta 3, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and Plague Tale Requiem. And it's a good split. I did the thing. I was like, stressed out about doing this because I knew it was going to be long. I kind of wanted to say what I wanted to say about most of these games. I've talked about these games multiple times in my other quarterly posts. So, and I never write down exactly what I want to say, and I'm kind of conflicted on how I talk about games still. But I hope like my passion for a lot of these came across at least in this stream. And I do enjoy making the list and kind of, you know, just throwing my thoughts down regardless. But yeah, that's I'm been nearly talking for 3 hours, and I don't think I want to stream like ever again after that. But thanks for hanging out, Keylok, Silent Snake, if you're still there, or anyone who hops in after the fact or watches the VOD or whatever. The written version of this will go up on my blog soon, and then the archive of the stream will go up on my YouTube channel at some point. But that's all I had. So yeah, thanks for hanging out, everyone. I do, with that said though, I did kind of want to stream like a few other 2023 releases. There's one game that just came out. I really want to stream it. I'm going to try to sneak it in at least for an hour or so over this weekend, hopefully, or maybe Friday night. I don't know which night I'm going to try to do it. But other than that, you'll see me probably still unexpectedly from time to time based on my work schedule just picked up. Or it's going to be picking up. The hour's going to be getting worse, or the demand's going to be getting worse. But if I can, I'm still hoping to do the quarterly posts. So the next time I do a stream like this, it'll be my 2023 quarter one. So the games I finished and played during January, February, and March of 2023. So we'll see where I'm at with the games I finished over these next few months. And as we build our way towards this list for next year, I already have a feeling certain games are already going to be have locked positions going into the end of next year or the end of this year. Like there's certain games coming out this year that I know I'm gonna really like regardless. So it's just a matter of kind of like reordering them in my head, like what really spoke to me at the end of the day. But yeah, thanks again for hanging out, Keylok. Hope whoever is watching or has been listening to this enjoyed it. I'm exhausted. I'm gonna log off and I'll talk to you all later. All right. Take care. Bye.